Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 878 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And we're hearing that Ukraine is putting the hurt on Russia, and also Israel is putting the FAFO on the Houthis in Yemen. And also, it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine and also the rising tensions within the Middle East, as we've been able to get breaking news today that the Israelis have conducted airstrikes against Lebanese and Yemeni ports controlled by Hezbollah and the Houthis, and it does appear that the Israelis are on a brink of war with the entire region and Iranian-backed proxies spanning all the way from the very southern end of the Arabian Peninsula and all the way up into the areas just south of the border of Turkey. It is a major development today inside the Middle East, and not only that, we were able to get breaking news out of the Ukraine war as well, as we were able to hear that near to the area of the town of Millerovo, a Ukrainian strike has ended up destroying a Russian airbase, and we were able to get footage from the ground and satellite pictures afterwards confirming the heavy destruction of Millerovo airbase, one of the air bases that is currently being used by Su-34 fighter bombers that are conducting close air support missions inside of Ukraine. We also were able to get major news as well from the area of Krasnodar, as we are starting to hear that apparently major blackouts are beginning to blanket the entire southern region of Russia as the Rostov nuclear power plant continues to go offline. The Russian government is trying to provide some sort of a viable explanation for this reason, but once again leading into an assumption that there may be something very bad going on at the Rostov nuclear power plant near to the city of Volgodonsk. At the exact same time, on the Ukrainian front lines, we got insane footage today of Ukrainians conducting close quarters combat with the Russians in Vovchansk, attempting to destroy and push Russian positions back in that area. And we were also able to see very valiant efforts by the Ukrainian armed forces within the areas of the Severonsky Forest, Bakhmut, and Avdiivka as they continue to destroy and slow Russian advances as best as they possibly can. This is a lot of news to cover, and even at that, there's a couple of things that were in the periphery on the news tonight that we will not be able to cover in detail. We may have a question about it here or there a little bit later, but there are some things that have happened that we can't really get onto too much on air. But to make sure to keep y'all up to speed, currently the North Koreans are sending the trash balloons back towards South Korea again as of today. We've also heard that apparently the Russian joint naval exercise with the Chinese may have ended within the region of the South China Sea, and at the moment we are also starting to hear of some pretty interesting developments in Europe as well, although I can't really go into those developments all too much on air, but a lot is going on, and we actually had to curate this news a lot tonight to be able to try and hit the most important points. And so I'm going to be taking you all to the most important point of the Ukraine war, and then we're pretty much going to hop down into the Middle East and start covering the major developments down there, as the ongoing prevailing winds within that area are starting to become very hostile again, pretty much as quickly as it possibly can. But moving on into the area around Millerovo, Millerovo is a small town that was actually near the Ukrainian border back in 2014 when the Donbass invasion began. And interestingly enough, there is an airbase right outside of Millerovo and just a few miles away from the Ukrainian border. Before the invasion of southern Ukraine in 2014 by the Russian army, Millerovo Air Base was only a short 10-mile distance away from the Ukrainian-Russian border, which is wildly close, mind you, but once again, I have to remind everyone that this airfield was built during the times of the Soviet Union, and it was never thought that the Soviet Union at that time would end up collapsing and fracturing into the multiple states that made up the Soviet Union, and so this airfield, it didn't really have any second thoughts or any questions put about it, about constructing it so close to the border of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. But moving on from that, the Millerovo Air Base is one that houses a decent amount of aircraft. And we can actually see, even in this satellite picture, that it is being considerably used by the Russian Air Force. We can actually see a large number of MiG-29 stationed down here at this end of the runway. We can also see a couple of Su-34 fighter bombers right here as well. And
those are massive, by the way. Like, look at how much larger those are compared to the other ones on the runway. Those things are monsters.
Dude, they are monsters, man. And I think if I'm correct, and let me go pull up the Su-34 so that way I can get the length of this thing, because I'm going to tell y'all something that is really shocking about this, but I want to make sure that it is exact. Okay, so it is. So let me make sure to get this so that way y'all can see the scale of modern day aircraft and the kind of amazing technological advances that we've made over the past 70 years or so. The B-17 Flying Fortress is about 74 feet long. And to make sure to get y'all a picture of this, let me go up here to the top and go grab y'all a picture of a B-17. This is the B-17 Flying Fortress, which many people know as the bomber. Like, this is one of the most commonly and most famously known types of bombers around the entire world. This was the backbone of the U.S. Army Air Corps in World War II, and this thing measures a whopping 74 feet and 6 inches long. The Sukhoi Su-34 fighter bomber, which is currently used by the Russian Federation in Ukraine, doesn't look, at least on paper, that this thing would be as big as a B-17. But what is shocking about it is that this aircraft is not only as big as a B-17, it is bigger than a B-17 by a whole 2 feet. This thing is 76 feet long, meaning that this thing in length is bigger than a B-17 Flying Fortress, just to get you all the scale of how big modern aircraft are.
And what's weird is you wouldn't really expect that, or at least I wouldn't. When you see this like large fighter bomber right here, you'd think that thing has got to be like huge, and it is large in its own respect. But these new fighter jets, which look like toys in pictures, are actually freaking massive. It's wild to see.
I mean, it really is something impressive, but it's also crazy to think that this was considered a strategic bomber during World War II, and now an aircraft of comparable size is considered a fighter bomber, kind of giving you the idea of how much technological advancement has been made just over the past 70 years alone since the end of World War II. But moving on from that, the Su-34s, at least one, we believe, fighter bomber brigade calls Millerovo Air Base its home, and you can see a large amount of these Su-34s just openly on the tarmac. And there's also a large amount of air defense as well. We can actually see a couple of radars that have been set up around here. You can actually see one of the acquisition radars right there and its shadow being cast onto the ground. But those acquisition radars and all of that air defense did absolutely nothing when it came to protecting the airbase from an incoming Ukrainian drone attack. The attack hit and the airfield went up in a blaze immediately. Here is a clip from nearby outside of the airbase showing the severity of the fire and the flames that began to consume a large part of the airbase as the night turned to day.
Quite terrible. This man filming sounds like he's gone to maybe upchuck at the side of this.
Man, he was he was like, bro, you just is all my text, buddy, believe. And we see another fire down there further on the airbase. Now, wait a minute, hang on. We can geolocate this because there is this building right here, the square building that it looks to be 2 floors tall. Where is he?
You know, we actually have a map. There was about 6 or 7 fires that were actually started on this airfield, and they're all toward the right side of the airfield. So right there in the center, I believe, is that building you're looking for, right there in the middle.
Right here?
I believe it's somewhere around that spot.
Are you sure? Because there's like no facilities around this building. Like, let's see. Let's try and get a better look. So there are the fires. So there's 2 fuel silos right there. So let's see if we can find. Okay, so there's 2 fuel silos, but those don't seem to be behind any kind of a guarded. Well, actually, that is a paved road. I thought that was a berm that they had built up around this, but no, it looks like some sort of a paved area or some sort of an area that has been tilled. So there are the 2 silos, and then there's a couple of other support buildings, which maybe these we can't really tell for certain. And then they move over a little bit further. Here in a second. Right there. You know, Matthew, I think you're actually right. I think that is a match because that looks like the building that is running perpendicular to the other right here, and it looks like they're connected somewhere in the middle. So I think...
Yeah, if I had to take a guess here, I would assume that the Ukrainians knew there was a grouping of aircraft toward the right side of the airfield, considering all the explosions were kind of around that same vicinity to the right of the airfield. So, you know, in the photo we saw there that you just showed a minute ago, actually the aircraft looked like they were toward the left side based on that photo, but they were clustered along the side, like basically right there on that right side. You see where the aircraft are lined up on the right over there on the
right
side runway? Yeah, that's where they were basically all based around these explosions.
Interesting. Let's see what else. So we can confirm that this is this building, and really quickly to point that out, there's this little area of the building that juts up right here on the southwestern side of the building, and we can see that right there in the clip. There is that part of the building. So this cameraman that's watching this explosion is standing somewhere about right here on the edge of this field. He is looking northwards towards either these fuel silos or kind of like fuel tanks that are up here on the north side of the airfield, or the fire is actually coming from the tarmac itself on the runway. And he's panning the camera from around here at the fuel silos over to this building, and then we got to see a fire that was happening further down, which I'll show y'all right here. So, one second, he'll turn the camera over left, and there's a fire down there, and it looks like that fire is somewhere around these buildings or this part of the tarmac. So it looks to me like they hit every single part of every area of the ramp with the Ukrainian drones that flew in. And it looks like the damage was incredibly extensive. Now let's go back and look at this video again. It looks like, and it's really a toss-up because we can't really get a good scale of how far away this is from the camera person. The camera person is on some kind of a field or a road right here at the edge of this field. But it looks like it's either on these fuel tanks or it's right here on the tarmac, meaning that either aircraft are burning or the fuel that keeps the aircraft flying is burning. One or the other. We can't
Listen, man, I got you covered. Go to our likes tab on our Twitter page, and you'll actually see each fire geolocated to the exact spot. There's about 6 of them.
Interesting. So let's go to Twitter really quickly and let's go find that, because we are getting down to the bottom of this. I mean, we are geolocating the hell out of this right now. So we'll go to the likes tab, and here we go. So this is where they state that the fires had occurred. I would have to say Slava Beach. Like, dude, that's
I
a
love
pretty
that.
man. But I would have to say we didn't see a fire right there. Like, because that camera person's about right here, and I don't think he ever panned to show us a fire that was right there on the edge of that field. But we can confirm that that one exists, and this one apparently exists. And I'm guessing that this one exists. We never saw number 6 on camera either. So the only ones that we saw on film were number 5, 3, and 1. We never saw 2, 4, and 6. But something that is a very important thing to note is that regardless whether we saw them or not, I'm even able to top that on the likes tab by one, Matthew, because we have Maxar satellite footage showing the before and after at Millerovo. So let's see what the fire damage ended up consuming. So we can actually see in this satellite picture, the MiG-29s aren't lined up in this area of the tarmac. It looks like the entire fighter brigade that made up those MiG-29s has moved on from this airbase. And now we can see little tiny pixels, little specks over here on the right side of the runway where the Su-34 fighter bombers are, which we believe that is the only fighter bomber brigade using Millerovo at this moment. And so let's see. So we can see fire damage on the tanks. We don't see any fire damage on the tarmacs. There's a fire that happened here and ends up eating up a large area. So what was right there? It's right outside of the base facilities. Right here, where all of their little crappy vehicles are used to service and maintain the aircraft. It's right outside of that and kind of around this blue-roofed building right here. And sadly, we don't know what that building's purpose is. And then there was another fire. Hang on.
Was that a hangar, it looks like?
It looks like some kind of one of those soft-covered hangars that they use to maintain aircraft. It looks like one of these right here. But let's go back. And let's see here. That is right over from here. The fire spot is right there. So it looks like they hit one of these little repair sheds right here where they service the Su-34s at. So it looks to me from the satellite footage that they probably didn't hit or destroy any aircraft at the airfield, which is a little bit sad, but they did end up knocking out most of the fuel tanks that are used to keep the aircraft running over here in this part of the airfield. They also may have been able to damage some of the service vehicles, although that seems a little unlikely, and then they were able to knock out a good part of the repair facilities at this airfield meant to maintain the aircraft in a more in-depth way than can be provided just on the tarmac or the ramp. So it looks as though this attack was fairly successful, but not as damaging as we originally would have thought, with the fire looking like it came straight from the runway. Another thing that I have to point out, Matthew, is that we're not seeing any fire, like on the likes map here, that happened down here. It was up here. We don't see any fire that happened to the number 2 spot, the number 1 spot, or the number 3, 5, and 6 spot, it looks like this map was a little bit inaccurate where it was planning the fires, because there was only 3 signs of fire damage on the entire airfield, from what we can tell on this satellite footage. One of them happened at the repair paddock, which this one didn't even account for at all. It literally picked everywhere but the repair paddock right down there. It also hit the fuel tanks, which it didn't have marked there, and then it hit this little open area right near to the service department, and that wasn't marked either on the map. Number 4 may have been that one's marker, but it's a little bit off and further south to the very end of the perimeter of the airfield to the south. But going...
Now, I will say this, that the map here, to my knowledge, I believe the way they compiled the map and also tried to deduce the location of the exact fires themselves was they looked at the NASA FIRM satellite, which tracks fire data, and that's sort of the way they triangulated it, and also looked at photos as well. So it might be slightly off a little bit, but generally, though, that was the sort of general location where each one was at.
Interesting. Usually, though, with firms, like trying to locate things with firms is actually not that accurate. It just kind of picks up a general location, because sometimes cloud cover gets in the way, and so it can tell that there's a fire, but it really can't tell where. So then it just kind of puts down like a general kind of like blanket dot, like the dot just goes down an exact area on the map, but it doesn't really know exactly where the fire is and its origins are at. It just kind of says it's in this general area. So I think that's why these markers on this little map were a little inaccurate, but the Maxar satellite was able to confirm that there was some pretty significant damage that ended up happening at Millerovo airfield, which is
Mac,
pretty...
I tell you, that Maxar satellite footage does no favors at all for like the appearance of that airfield. It looks like a dump before and after the explosions. Like that Maxar like footage is horrific looking, like on the ground.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie. Of this airfield here, it's like it looks like garbage on like the normal Google views, but it doesn't look that bad for a Russian airfield. And then Maxar made it look like garbage, like literal absolute garbage. Just like, that's rough. I mean, like, that's rough for the Russians.
Maxar coming in clutch for Ukrainian propaganda, I'm telling you.
Man, on this satellite view, it's just like, and then on Maxar, it's like, dude, it's like, that's bad. But speaking of bad, we have to move y'all out of Ukraine for a brief moment and move y'all on down into the Middle East, because while the big news came out at Millerovo that there was a pretty significant attack, and it does appear to have caused a decent amount of damage to the airfield's infrastructure and facilities, there was something today that has happened down in the Middle East that really makes the Millerovo attack pale in comparison to the kind of results that we saw down here in this region. Allow me to explain. Israel has gotten pissed off very recently because of the attack that occurred just 2 days ago on Tel Aviv, where a large Houthi drone ended up flying pretty much all the way from Yemen, from what we understand, past the Sinai Peninsula, which is right here from the area around the city of Suez all the way to the Israeli border. It flew through Sinai, then flew into the Mediterranean, and then it turned east, and it attacked Tel Aviv from the Mediterranean, which was pretty shocking, and it ended up resulting in at least 1 killed and I believe over a dozen wounded. The Israeli government has not taken this too lightly, and already ended up taking out some punishment attacks against Hezbollah, which wasn't even responsible for this attack, by wiping out another Hezbollah commander within the southern region of Lebanon. At the exact same time, massive news came out that they actually went and struck the people who attacked Israel just a few days ago in Yemen. They have gone and conducted one of the most large and pretty shocking airstrikes that we've seen in the entirety of the Middle East, apparently using F-35s to be able to conduct this strike. We don't really know exactly the Israeli Air Force's attack routes or how this air operation was conducted. That information will most likely be classified or heavily guarded for a while until it's released to the public in about a week, maybe a few weeks, and then we'll get all the details decades on in the future. But moving on from that and down into the port of Al Hodeida, this is the major port that the Yemeni Houthis control, or the Yemeni Houthis is the best way to explain that, inside of Western Yemen. The Houthis do not control the entirety of Yemen. I would like to make that very clear, and many people may or may not know this, but there's an ongoing civil war right now in between the official Yemeni government, which controls most of the area that we do not have marked in green, but the area marked in green is completely controlled and operated by the Houthi government, an illegitimate government that rose up against the official Yemeni government and has been conducting hostile actions really ever since 2011, pretty much during the Arab Spring, like everyone else suffered inside of the Middle East. But nevertheless, Israel does not care, and Israel only sees an enemy force that has attacked the Israeli state and is now going to take action against them. From what we have seen, it is unbelievable. Israel bombed a weapons cache and also an oil depot inside of Al Hodeida port, and the explosion was insane. Actually, let me go get you all the actual footage of the explosion, and let me see if we can get it. So here we go. I think this is it. It was an ammo cache / fuel depot, so it's really all one and the same. Here we go. There we go. That's it.
I see some fireworks going off. You know, that's definitely some weapons.
And there we go. That is one hell of an explosion right there. That was the attack that the Israelis conducted by an airstrike on Al Hodeida port. That was the initial explosion from the bomb that hit. And now
that first explosion, like I have a suspicion here that the Houthis might be like storing some Chinese fireworks or something like that in the building, because that might be their side hustle, because that is too big of a beautiful explosion right there with all the little sparkles in it and stuff like that to just be like normal ammunition blowing up.
maybe not. Who knows? But still, we can see an explosion right here.
Damn.
And then we can see our last clip here, which is someone driving on a motorway nearby and looking at the fires burning in Al Hodeida. Moving on from these 3 clips, we then have additional footage, which is pretty crazy to see as well. Like the massive fire that came as a result of the airstrike. This is the same clip from before, so we're going to skip past that one. I'm trying to make sure that we go through these in sequence because I just kind of threw them all down. But I want to make sure that we're getting to the right one. So here is the massive oil fire that started because the airstrike not only hit the ammo cache in Al Hodeida, it also hit a massive fuel depot as well. And that's one hell of a fire, man. That is a bonfire.
That is crazy. Also, I'm not sure if you can notice it here, but the water is actually on fire right there due to the fuel in the water. You know you're in trouble when the water catches on fire. Like that's some bad stuff right there.
Man, everybody's gangsta until the water catches on fire. It's like dude, the Russians...
this is one of the largest like oil fires I've ever seen. Like even in Russia, you know, Ukraine's hit some big places, but this is one of the biggest ones I've ever seen on video ever.
I mean, it's huge. Let's see if we can actually geolocate the exact spot in Al Hodeida where this happened. Y'all know that geolocations are some of the most important things that we can do on this channel because it gives us such a clear view of what we're looking at. So we found immediately the entire pretty much fuel depot or fuel farm, if you want to call it that, right here down near Al Hodeida port. We can see that apparently the seaport is temporarily closed. We wonder why. But we also get to see that there are some larger warehouses next to the fuel depot right over here, and this is where we believe that the ammunition was most likely stored that ended up blowing up in the initial explosion, and then the massive oil fires began to sweep the remainder of the port during the next coming hours and day. Well, really just the next coming hours, not days, because days haven't really passed at this point. But still, the damage has been severe. We assume that about a third of all of the port facilities of Al Hodeida are currently on fire or have been destroyed in the ammo depot and oil fire explosions that have occurred. And not only that, Matt, you know something else I noted that was really interesting here? And I just want to make sure that we're getting this right. Okay, so apparently this is the queue right here that you're looking at for all of the 18-wheelers just to get into Al Hodeida port. And I don't really know what they're going in here for, but it is a pretty extensive line of trucks right there.
I wonder what they're going in there for. Like, I'm really curious. Since the area is Houthi controlled, what could all the semi-trucks be going in there for? I wonder. Is it aid? Is it something more nefarious? We may never know.
Man, I have no idea, but still, this port is wildly sparse, man, to be like an actual port. Also, these buildings look like they've been through some better days down here at the actual port. If you look at them, They look rough. I mean, most of this port looks pretty freaking rough.
Man, just a little spackling ought to, like, fix it up a little bit. But, like, really, though, one thing we have to remember here, to my knowledge, this is one of the first times that Israel has ever attacked Houthi-controlled Yemen. So today was actually somewhat historic, if I have my information correct. And this is one of the first attacks here, one of the largest ones indeed. This is certainly a very big event. And also, we've heard in the past that some NATO partners, and also the U.S., really was not hot about going into Yemen and striking certain targets there. But now we see Israel made the very long trip all the way from their country, all the way down there to teach them a lesson. So they were very dedicated to go all the way that far to actually do this.
I mean, it is wild to see. And also, here's another clip of the fire.
This dude's lost for words.
Dude, this guy, this screaming really adds a lot to the theme, like going on here from this point. I'm not gonna lie, you just got some guy driving through. People are hiding behind barrels. People are running, and you just got this guy going, "Oh no, leave me!" It's like, dude, it's like this ain't a good look, man. Like.
Look at that dude is running out here in the middle of it. Hey, what they do? Run him over or something? Where'd he go?
I don't know. I don't know.
He just got run over.
This guy's just driving like a maniac, running people over in the port that's on fire, going, "Oh no! Look at him, dude!" It's like, dude, it's like, just stop yelling and focus on not running people over. But beyond that,
man, the only people that died that day was the guy that this fella right here ran over. It wasn't the bombs or the fire. It was this fella driving his lifted truck.
Dude, just yelling at the top of his lungs as he was driving through the port. Oh my lord! And we also got this video of the fire as well. This is right after the actual fuel fire happened. And really quickly, let's pause and reflect. Okay, so we got the 2 fuel silos down here. We've got these little loading gate kind of a thing off to the side. So these 2 fuel silos right here are the ones that we see on the clip right down there. Because you can actually see those little loading gate things off to the right side, which is what you see right here on the satellite picture. So pretty much this fire is enveloping every single fuel tank, silo, whatever you want to call it, north of these 2 down here, or really these 3, although that third one is almost enveloped by the fire as well. But here's the clip. That is one hell of a fire right there, man. I have never seen one burn out of control like that.
That is massive. And you wonder, because the Russians always have a very hard time getting fires like this under control, because first of all, they don't even have the proper materials. They don't have the foam to put out an oil fire, because you can't put water on it. That makes it worse. So you wonder, if the Russians can't put it out with their limited resources, the Houthis with even worse resources, are they ever going to be able to put this out? Because I think it's still burning.
The answer is no. Like the answer is no. That's a great rhetorical question, Matthew. But the answer is certainly no. They are not going to be able to put that fire out, guaranteed. This is going to burn for quite some time. But Matthew, I was told by port authorities that their response was, no, you like this.
Man, that's always the reaction, like from some of these videos here, is whenever you see a certain explosion in a certain area of the world, there's always just like nonstop screaming, panic, and just freak out. It's like, had they not learned yet? It's like yelling and screaming at the top of your lungs fixes nothing. It just causes chaos. And then you end up running your brothers over, which doesn't help at all. So, it's not all that yelling isn't productive at all.
Man, don't run over your brothers. Moral
oh,
of the
save
story.
them, save them.
But that is a ferocious fire down there. That is pretty rough. It's interesting how the fire is kind of like glowing green nearly. Do you notice that?
I was wondering if that was the video, like a filter or something. But yeah, it is kind of a greenish fire, really.
Yeah, that's really weird. I wonder what they're putting in that oil.
It's that it's gone bad.
It's gone sour. Like it's been there for too long. Dang, and there's just fire over everything right now south of those fuel tanks. Even in the loading area, stuff is on fire. That is some pretty extensive damage. It looks as though the Israelis are attempting to pretty much wipe out any Yemeni oil storages that are currently controlled by the Houthis. But still, this is a major escalation, without a shadow of a doubt. This is probably one of the biggest ones that we've seen recently by the Houthis against Israel, and now we're seeing that the Israelis are returning fire, and they are not playing nice this time around for sure. We have been told that apparently Israeli F-35s were used in this airstrike, which would be pretty interesting. It would probably be one of the first times in recent Israeli history that the F-35I has been used, as the F-35I is the export variant made specifically for Israel. But nevertheless, right inside of Israel, we are also starting to hear that once again tensions are starting to rise in between the state of Israel and forces within the area of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, as we were able to hear reports of firefights inside the area of Jericho. Flares are reported up over the border between Israel and Jordan near the city of Jericho in the West Bank, with gunfire reportedly also heard coming from the Jordanian side. It sounds as though something is going on at the moment, and Jordanian security forces are actually engaging and attacking forces that are inside of the West Bank. That is incredibly interesting, as some people may or may not know this. This is a very interesting historical fact. For a while, Jordan, which was actually called Transjordan, by the way, the name changed after a while, but it used to be called Transjordan, actually controlled the West Bank. A lot of people don't know that. That changed, I believe, back in the 70s, if I'm correct, but they actually did end up controlling the West Bank, and it was a part of Jordan, and pretty much administered and governed by Jordan for quite a while. So it's very interesting to see that Jordanian security forces are engaging Palestinian forces within the West Bank at the moment, near to the area of the city of Jericho, because they usually, historically, were actually on fairly good terms, or Jordan was governing the area. But still, pretty interesting to know. And we'll be trying to get more information about what is...
So we actually do have some information on it that I just saw come in just a minute ago. It says here that Jordanian and Israeli officials are reporting that a smuggling attempt by the terrorists were trying to go across the Jordan River into Israel to the east of Jericho on the West Bank, and it was foiled by the Jordanian and Israeli officials. So it looks like it was some type of attempt to get weapons or some type of contraband over the border, and it looks like it was caught, and probably the people were eliminated from the sounds of it. So that's what the shots and also the flares were all about.
Man, Jordan is not playing those games, man. Jordan is not playing around. Also, you know something I just noticed, Matthew, is in the city of Jericho, they actually have ancient Jericho right here. I actually didn't know that there were any ruins left of Jericho, but apparently there is. That's actually really
like
interesting.
New York and also York?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I suppose. But also, another thing that's really interesting is that apparently they have an amusement park called Tigerland and Jericho Waves. What is Tigerland? Is this like Tiger King, but for like... Wait, hang on. Bro, that is a devil.
What the hell
that
is
is
that?
the devil. Like, I don't know what that is. It is the devil.
Straight up goblin on camera.
Huh, well, this is actually pretty... That's nightmare fuel right there,
Man,
for sure.
This is like the back room. It's like amusement park.
Man, yikes. Dude, Jericho never really recovered from that whole the walls collapsing thing. I think they're still kind of like trying to get over that. That's a tough amusement park. Maybe Jericho Waves is a little bit better. Dude, they got like advertisement and everything for it? Like, dude.
Now open. Come right to the war zone.
Man, this is actually pretty nice. This is not what people make out the West Bank to be. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh my gosh, look. They have Coca-Cola banners up. Like, I thought that was only a Southern thing. Like, Coke comes out and actually puts up banners and stuff like that.
interesting. And the West Bank, nonetheless, interesting. That's does Coca-Cola put up those same kind of like covers in Israel? I'm very interested now. We need to go find an amusement park in Tel Aviv and check that. Okay, so here we go. There's Luna Park over here. Maybe this would be it. Okay, so we are looking for Coke banners. We are looking for Coke banners. Coke banners. Any Coke banners? I'm not seeing any. Let's see here. Coke banners. Coke banners. I'm not seeing any Coke banners. So this is official, folks. Coca-Cola sponsors the West Bank, not Israel. I'm not saying that like as a real thing. I'm saying that as a joke. But very interesting. Yeah, that's weird.
It's crazy to see all the like normal like Western companies like they've spread their tentacles everywhere. It's like I would not really expect to see like Coca-Cola banners out here. Like, not saying it's like, you know, odd to see Coca-Cola being drank out here or drinking or whatever you want to call it, but just to see like the whole sponsorship thing going on or whatever, that's kind of weird.
That is so weird. It really is. Let's see. Do they have any other sponsors or anything for this park, like at all? Yeah, it seems like it's just Coca-Cola, man. Like, they are big into the Coca-Cola thing. That is news to me. I'm not gonna lie, this little place right here is making the West Bank not look that bad. I mean, it just kind of looks a little normal. But let's go down 1 second before I say that. They have street view in the West Bank? Like, that's an actual thing? Like, I thought no one was allowed to go in the West Bank. Okay, well, maybe it's not the best of looking places, but the theme park was pretty nice. So, that's news. That's news to me. But anyways, moving on from that, we are getting the idea that there was a little firefight that happened around that area, apparently to avert a smuggling operation. Meanwhile, up in Lebanon, we got to see that another ammo cache got hit and blown up. And here's the clip. Actually, you know what, Matthew? I think there was some misreporting, but someone marked this down here as being in Al Hadida, this same clip. But this one was being geolocated to Adlun in Lebanon. And I was able to find Adlun earlier. It's right up. Let me go find it. There we go. Here it is. It's right up
Also,
here.
who was the other one from, by the way? What was the other source on the other one? Just so I know.
Let's see here. The other source was. Let's see here. Let me check. Let's see.
All right. Just wanted to check and see. Not trying to bash the guy or anything like that. I was just curious.
Wait. He said, let's see, also targeted major arms depot near the town of Adalun in southwestern Lebanon. So
it says Lebanon.
So they included all three clips into one thing, and then, we just had to kind of fill in the blanks, and I did not fill in the blanks. But beyond that, the giant explosion that we saw that looked like it was from Al Hadida a second ago, correction, is actually from Adlun. I have both of these clips. I thought they looked similar, and then when we were playing them on air, I was like, they're identical. So this one is actually from Adlun. This is not from Al Hadida. But there's the clip. Once again,
that explains the weapons cache getting hit, because I think the only target that was really hit inside of Yemen was that massive fuel depot. So that makes a lot more sense now. This was actually in Lebanon where the Chinese fireworks went off.
And they are a big fan of Chinese fireworks. Many people have the Beirut explosion to look at as reference. But beyond that, we have a load of stuff to talk about in this region. There's a lot going on right now, without a shadow of a doubt, and a lot of people are saying that this will most likely start to cause a little bit more of a serious situation within the area. It probably will, but before we get on back into that, we do have to address a question that I forgot to address, and so now I have to kind of backtrack and make the whole segment seem a little bit weird, because Russia's border regions just keep getting hammered by Ukrainian attacks, and will Putin ramp up that retaliation? Will he? Will he not? Who knows? But a lot of y'all have many different opinions on this, and a lot of people are thinking that this is nothing more than a bunch of Bogachar, and it will be ramped up, and they're going to get hit even harder. But some of y'all are saying that there will be normal attacks to continue, and others are saying that they won't retaliate at all. But Matthew, what are people thinking and what are people saying? I gotta know.
All right, so y'all have seen over many weeks that Ukraine keeps hammering Russia's border regions, including Belgorod, and other places as well. So it's happening all the time. And the big question is, will Putin ramp up retaliation due to these attacks by Ukraine getting ramped up themselves? It looks like 50% said yes, Putin will ramp up retaliation, while 35% said, Russia will really just continue their normal attacks, and 7% said no, Putin won't retaliate at all. And honestly, on this one, I'm with the 35%. I just think that normal attacks will continue from Russia because there's really not much Russia can do to ramp things up, really hardly at all, because they're really low on equipment, they're low on missiles, and they don't have the ability to go basically FAFO style like we just saw Israel do on Yemen. They don't have that capability. So I think it will stay pretty much normal. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that it's most likely going to continue on as normal attacks. They're already going all out. It's a full-on conventional war, so it's not really like anyone has anything extra to pull out at the moment, so I don't really think a lot is going to happen as a consequence on the Millerovo airfield attack. It's most likely going to be completely unanswered, which is really good for the Ukrainian side because they are able to continue to attack Russian air bases and hopefully knock out their abilities, at least for short stints of time, and the Russians really can't do anything extra that they already aren't doing at this very moment. And so I hope that that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, and I know that the next question is going to be about the Middle East and the ongoing situation
it will be.
I wish we had answered these questions or talked about them in the right sequence because I let that one linger for so long. Now we're having to almost circle back with the questions and then do the whole new segments over again, or at least kind of talk about them when we've already moved on, which is sad, man. I should have paid more attention to that. But anyways,
it's all right, man, because the Israel news is so big, it's worth returning back to because it was literally a historic day with these attacks in Yemen.
Man, I'm telling you you what, man, it was a historic day. But meanwhile, while it's a historic day down in the Middle East, it seems as though there is probably going to be history in the making in the southern region of Russia. Many of y'all know that yesterday we started to cover the rumors that there is a radiation leak occurring at the Volgodonsk power plant, also called the Rostov nuclear power plant, within the area of southern Russia. And we are starting to hear that apparently there are rolling blackouts affecting areas even as far south as the city of Krasnodar, which are directly affected by the blackouts that are being, that are happening because of the Rostov nuclear power plant. According to information that we have at the moment, blackouts in southern Russia are allegedly caused by an increased load on the Rostov nuclear power plant. It is said to be unable to cope due to its connection to the occupied regions of Ukraine. Now, I'm calling cap on that, and I'm going to explain why. The southern region of Ukraine, specifically Donetsk and Luhansk, which are the ones that are connected currently to the Russian power grid, have been connected to the Russian power grid since at least 2017. And the Rostov nuclear power plant has never had trouble with providing the entire area with electricity and keeping the entire area's lights on. The fact that there are rolling blackouts now at the exact same time that there's starting to be reports, or well, really rumors from the ground, that there is a radiation leak around Volgodonsk and that pretty much all of the iodide tablets, which would be used to treat radiation sickness, have disappeared from the local pharmacies. It sounds to me like the nuclear power plant has gone offline because there may have been a major incident that required them to shut down the entire plant, and now the entire area, even as far south as Krasnodar, are starting to go through rolling blackouts because this power plant has been completely shut off, and the grid cannot keep up with the demands of the electricity that is needed at any given moment in time. This is something that is leading me to believe today that it's probably a higher certainty now than it was in the past that there has been a nuclear incident at the Rostov nuclear power plant. A lot of people have been talking about this, and before we even get into asking the question here, because I feel like the news and the questions are like coming at different times, but Matthew, do you think that a incident has actually happened at the Rostov nuclear power plant, considering that blackouts have been happening now for about 2 days? And there really is no news or information about the actual condition of the plant, and the stories that they're putting out aren't really making a lot of sense, are they?
So to me, all we really know for a fact at the moment is the Rostov nuclear power plant did have a major safety failure, which resulted in the shutdown of one of the power reactors at the plant. Beside that, we're basically left with rumors, and that could be part of the reason why we really haven't seen this widespread reported in the media, is because right now there's no concrete proof of anything. But then again, we have to keep in mind that the Russian government is going to go through extreme measures to make sure that if something did happen at the plant, that no information gets out about the disaster. So we're in a bit of a catch-22 here. There are rumors and unconfirmed sources on the ground still claiming that there's radiation leaking out, and also that there's a major security issue on the ground. So we just don't really know. Honestly, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking it sounds like Chernobyl. But then again, that's just my own speculation. To me, I would assume that something has happened, but I'm not really sure exactly how big of a magnitude the disaster really is. And only time will tell. But I think something has occurred, and there probably is some amount of radiation leaking, but without a Geiger counter to know, it's just, we're just guessing, basically.
I would have to say I think that there was a nuclear incident that has happened here. I don't think it's a complete meltdown. Of course, that wouldn't even be easy to hide. That would be pretty much impossible to hide after a couple of days. But something certainly has happened here. Maybe something along the lines of 3 Mile Island, maybe. And that's why we're seeing that the power plant pretty much is not even producing any electricity for the grid at the moment, from what we know, because it makes no sense at all that this power plant has been connected to the southern Russian grid and also the Ukrainian grid for years now. This isn't anything new. They've been attached for an incredibly long time. And now they're going to act like it can't keep up with the demands of the grid, although it's been doing it for years. That sounds like bogus to me. And it sounds like they're trying to cover up that an incident has happened, and they've ended up having to shut down pretty much the entire plant because of the incident in the meantime. However,
you know what they're trying to say? You know what they're trying to say? The Russians are trying to sell this lie, which makes me even more suspicious. They're saying that because the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant isn't outputting what it used to output because the reactors have been shut down, they're saying that all of a sudden out of the blue, even though the Zaporizhzhia plant's been shut down for quite some time now, just suddenly out of the blue, the Rostov plant can't keep up. which makes no sense at all. And just a couple days ago, when we reported this, it was actually said by the Russian government that it was simply rumors causing the power outages, which makes no sense at all. Since when does a rumor cause the power to go out at a power plant? It sounds like the Chernobyl lines all over again to me. But like I said, we may only know in the coming weeks exactly what's happened with this, or if Europe detects some radiation leaking into their air, that might also alarm us as well.
Man, they sat there and said this, man. Someone said, Evan, I think the nuclear power plant has had a problem. Like, the power just cuts off instantly. They're like, and the Russian government's like, damn it, you and your stupid rumors. The power would have kept on if you had not said that stupid crap. It's like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, literally, that just doesn't even make physical, logical sense on any level. Someone will believe that out there. But moving on from that, we also got to see that more T-62s are being pulled from deep inside of Russia. We don't really know how many of them are left. We're assuming there isn't that many left, but they're still pulling them into Ukraine. And there they are. They've been outfitted with the bare minimum of a cope cage, and then they'll be further modified once they arrive on the front. But a pretty sad day for the Russians. It just keeps on getting sadder and sadder for them. I don't think it's improving anytime soon. But moving on from that, we have to circle back into the Middle East, because we have been able to see that there has been some very interesting developments over just the past few hours inside the area, as Israel has hit Al-Hadida and has also hit a port within southern Lebanon, causing significant explosions, both directed at forces that are fighting against Israel at the moment and supported and funded by the Iranian government, that being Hezbollah and the Houthis. It seems as though the tensions are continuing to rise in the area, and a lot of people have been wondering, what should Israel be doing, or what should they have done today? Should they have not conducted these strikes? Should they be hitting these proxies with everything they have? What should they be doing in response to the attack that happened yesterday? And what did they, and depending on what they did today, did that seem like a good move today or not? And Matthew, what are people thinking and saying about that? And what are you thinking as well? I mean, there's got to be a lot of opinions on this, because it's a major ordeal in this region.
Yes, indeed. And it looks like about 80% of the audience, the overwhelming majority, said that Israel should hit the proxies much harder than they even are right now, while 10% said it really doesn't matter because war is inevitable in the Middle East. And 7% said Israel should exercise some restraint and prevent escalation. And on this one, I don't mean to sound like a pessimist, but I'm actually with the 10%. I would say it personally really does not matter what Israel really does to the Houthis, because war is inevitable at this point. The proxy forces are being set up basically for a slaughtering to come up very soon, because they're going to go along with what Iran wants them to do, which is to go berserk and try to hit Israel. So, also, to me, the news about Iran having nuclear weapons potentially ready to go in 1 to 2 weeks, I'm still of the mindset that we should not let Iran get those nuclear weapons. And I'm almost positive that there are people in the government, in the Israeli government and also in the U.S. government, which share the same opinion of me, that think that we should definitely stop Iran from getting those nukes. So this could be the prelude to something much larger coming in the very soon future, and maybe we might see some strikes on Iran directly by the allied forces, perhaps. But that's just my speculation on that part. But I'm definitely with the 80%. We should hit the proxies hard and hit them now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be of the same idea as well. We should hit the proxies wildly hard. War is inevitable at this point, of course, but the Israelis should try and get the upper hand immediately by conducting strikes on the proxies, and hopefully with joint efforts by the United States, we can see that airstrikes also begin to occur against the Islamic Republic of Iran, against key sites that are trying to produce weapons of mass destruction. I will say this very clearly, though, considering that some people may have not been around for last night's stream, I do not believe that a ground invasion and occupation of Iran would be a good or necessary action for the Western world. It would be incredibly cost prohibitive. We would most likely get tied down in the area once again for about another decade, which we generally want to avoid. What we want to do is deprive the Iranian government of the ability to produce a nuclear weapon. We do not want to completely overthrow them, because that could start to destabilize the region massively, and it's already on a pretty precarious pedestal as it is. So I would say that strikes against Iran in limited form, targeting key sites, would probably be the best thing thing to do, and then just leave it at that. We have done that in the past with Operation Praying Mantis, where the United States ended up destroying half of the Iranian Navy in about half an hour. And if we could do that back then and not really have any major consequences or repercussions come from it, we should do that again against Iran, but against their nuclear weapons program that is currently just weeks away from having most likely some sort of a usable nuclear weapon. Although we'll probably see them test that nuclear weapon first, because usually most countries like to test their nuclear weapons to see if they work before they actually go and start using them, because usually they have to see if the pudding has been cooked correctly, and then if it's cooked correctly, then they start cooking up more of them. But with that, I hope that does address
Also,
that.
one other thing as well. I see Andy L just said in the live chat that he says the U.S. has been tripling production of the bunker buster bombs for over 3 months. And I think I also saw that report somewhere else, Andy, as well. And considering that we are raising the production of those bunker busters, I think that could maybe indicate, it could be maybe not correlated. It's possible that it's not correlated, but we should put those things to use and actually go to Iran with those bombs and missiles and hit these sites. To me, with Iran being so unstable and also so zealous toward the Israeli neighbors, I would say there's really no reason to hold off on that, because once they get those nukes, in my opinion, we're going to be looking at an entirely different game that's being played in the Middle East, where Iran gets to call the shots and the West is basically with their hands tied behind their back because we were too scared to act and prevent a disaster from taking place. I think Iran getting nukes is the worst case scenario, and we should send in some of those bombs and just finish the job right now.
I would agree with that. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in this region. And now we're going to be moving back on into Ukraine, because we do have some really big news, and we were actually able to finally get confirmation out of the area of Sevastopol. Many of y'all will know that we reported a couple of days ago that the Ukrainians ended up conducting a successful attack against a Russian Coast Guard base near to the area of Novozerne. The little base that we're talking about is actually right down here. Now, this looks like a crapper, but hey, the Russians always run a pretty crapper looking base, but this is the base that was targeted and destroyed. And you can also see this little row of houses down here, if you want to call it that appear to have been completely abandoned at some point. I gotta say, dude, Sevastopol looks dry. Like, it is such a dry looking place.
It really is. It's just dry land. Although I will say this, even though it's dry land, that dry land belongs to Ukraine, and I hope they get it back.
Sheesh, dude, oh my lord. This is rough.
This is like where you take someone out to, put them out of their misery or something.
Dude, this is where you put someone out to pasture. Like, that's what you're trying to say. Good lord. That is rough. Like, dang, that is pretty rough right there. That was from 2013, by the way. But we did get to see the damage was caused to the Coast Guard base, and here is the proof. You can see it right there, and there's the aftermath. My goodness, were they cooked? They were toasting quite nicely. Look at this. Look at the before. Look at the after. And I can show you all once again exactly where this is, right along the little coastline within this inlet. It is... let's see here. It is right... Did they build out this area? Because... Wait. It's up here. Hold up. These boats sank. Look at that. Like, they're actually below the waterline. This one's been completely stripped. So there was like a little graveyard going on here. And then they had some Coast Guard vessels right here, because they apparently cleared this out at some point, and there were actual usable Coast Guard vessels sitting here. And then this is the aftermath of the fire and everything else that resulted.
Man, that's just...
It's like rip bozo. It's like that's a pretty rough day for those folks. But hey, that's how it works for the Russians in Ukraine, and it looks like they're just continuing to have worse and worse days so far down there in Sevastopol. But moving on from that little bit of news, it's now time for us to get on into the frontline news in Ukraine of all of the wild footage that we've gotten today, especially in some areas, as we've seen pretty much point-blank range firefights occurring between the Russians and Ukrainians, and it is pretty wild. But before we get into all of that, we do have a little bit of information that we have to talk about with the Rostov nuclear power plant. And a lot of people have been talking about the Russian citizens who are rioting right now due to the blackouts, and a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts. And a lot of people are actually believing that the Russians have covered up a nuclear accident. But Matthew, what are people thinking and saying about that? And what are you thinking and saying about that as well? We got to know. We got to know. What is it, Matthew?
So it looks like the viewers on the stream, about 73% of them, another overwhelming majority, said that Russia is covering up a nuclear accident after we learned about major blackouts from the Rostov nuclear power plant having issues, and while 18% said Russia is simply incompetent with the power production, and 3% said it's really nothing to worry about. So if you're 3%, I'm going to call you Anatoly Dyatlov. Not great, not terrible. But anyways, to the 17%, I would say that Russia is certainly incompetent, and power production is no exception to that. They're incompetent with that as well. But in this case, I'm going to go with my gut. I have nothing to back it up with fact right now except for rumors and unconfirmed reports, but I have a deep suspicion that there might have been a small to medium to maybe large nuclear accident at that plant. Obviously, we don't know that yet. But I have a suspicion that something has happened to some degree, but we'll simply have to wait and see. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that they're most likely covering up some sort of a nuclear incident. I'm going to say this because people hear that and then they think Chernobyl. It's not a meltdown to the point that a reactor has exploded. It's nothing along those lines. This is most likely something of a radiation leak, or it was something where the power plant ended up overheating, and so then they had to shut it down. It is some kind of an incident that has happened. It's not the most severe case, and it's not the most minor case, but something did, without a shadow of a doubt, happen in this area, and I'm not doubting that at all at this point, especially considering that there are rolling blackouts throughout the entirety of the region, and the Russians are trying so hard to cover it up, at least with the statements and what they're sounding like. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would assume. But before we move on into that frontline news, we do have a couple of questions to answer, and they are very interesting questions. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
And our first question of the night goes to Brian Morgan, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. And a huge shout out to you, Brian, for that massive support, the largest super chat of the night. And we appreciate it very much. And he says, just a little something to start the stream off. And you guys are doing a great job. And thank you very much for the kind words. He said, keep up the good work and take a question from the chat, please.
And thank you so much, Brian Morgan, for the support. I gotta say this. I don't know what it is, Matthew, but I'm drinking like 400 milligrams of caffeine now, and I just never stop like feeling like I'm about to pass out. I don't know what it is, man. Like I'm sitting here, I'm like, I literally drank like the physical amount, the cap that you can drink before you start getting into like heart attack territory, and I'm still like nearly passing out. I'm telling you, man, it's a rough.
You've gotten immune to it. I'm telling you, you've gotten immune to it. I have zero caffeine right now. No caffeine. I know that's hard to believe, but I'm operating off of zero. But one thing I have changed though is I've literally started walking 2 miles every single day, and also trying to run it as well. But I'm a little bit out of shape, so that's not going too great with the running part. But the walking part's going pretty good. I'm doing 2 miles a day, and that's like having coffee without the caffeine. It's really like making a huge difference. So if you're not doing that, I would recommend it. It's really good.
Well, Matthew says that while he knows I'm walking like the same amount.
No, I'm talking about to the audience. I'm not talking about you.
Man, I was like, dude, I'm already doing that, and then I'm drinking coffee, and I'm exhausted every day. But beyond that, thank you so much for the massive support, Brian Morgan, and helping this channel keep running. Sorry getting sidetracked on that. I was just sitting there thinking that because I had to like smack myself across the face to stop from yawning right there for no reason at all. But beyond that, I got to thank you so much once again for starting the stream off in a big bang. That is a massive amount of support, and folks like you help to keep this channel running. It is unbelievable that folks like you enjoy this channel so much that you would like to support it and help to make this channel possible. And thank you for saying that we're doing a great job and wanting us to keep up the good work. We try our best to make sure that the news we report is accurate on its location, it is accurate in the amount of information that it delivers, and that the stories even existed at all. You ain't gonna be hearing about no train robberies on this channel, that's for sure. And you ain't gonna be hearing about no politics either. You're gonna be hearing the raw news, the way it comes out every single day. And I got to thank you so much once again, Brian Morgan, for really appreciating that and supporting this channel and being a part of this amazing Leaf Spring Army and helping to make the entire thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are going to make sure to get that live chat in honor of Brian Morgan. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and this live chat question, sponsored by Brian, goes to TS, who says, what was the distance of the Israeli strike today, and how does that translate to cross distance to Iran?
And let's see here. Can you reread that one again?
They said, what was the distance of the Israeli strike today? So from Israel to Yemen, down there at the port. And how does that translate when you look at the same distance from Israel to Iran? Is it about the same or is it different?
So the airstrike at Al Hadida, if we're assuming that these aircraft took off from the middle of the Negev Desert, let me see if I can actually find the airfield that's out here. It's near the Negev Nuclear Research Site. I just got to try and remember exactly where. There we go. There it is. That's the airfield I'm talking about. It is the Nevatim airbase. So let's take that little marker and let's drag that up here to the Nevatim airbase. Oh, nope, 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 nope. Okay. So, okay, never mind. We'll just do it this way. All right, so that means that those aircraft flew a one-way trip just to conduct, well, flew a one-way trip and then dropped the bombs. I don't know where they dropped the bombs and how far away that was, but from the bomb taking off on the plane to hitting the target, that was a distance of 1,240 miles from Israel to Yemen. Now, the distance from Israel to Iran is actually a lot shorter. I can already say that off the top of my head. But let's go back to the Nevatim airbase. Let's put down the marker right there. And let's say that they want to hit Isfahan. That aircraft or the ordnance on board the aircraft will only have to travel 980 miles to be able to hit pretty much within the heart of Iran at Isfahan. So it's actually a lot shorter of a distance for Israel to attack Iran than it is for them to attack against the Houthis inside of Houthi-controlled Yemen. The difference, however, is not that it's more difficult to hit Iran, and that's why Israel isn't hitting them. It's the diplomatic ramifications and repercussions of striking Iran. Iran does have a little bit of backing from the Russian Federation, which is a little bit concerning, and not only that, it could start to destabilize the region even further, especially if those airstrikes began to spurn open revolts or rebellions against the Iranian government. It could then snowball out of control pretty rapidly, and the entire region is destabilized. I saw someone in the chat saying earlier, why in the world would we care if the region gets destabilized when it's a shithole? And that was a very interesting question. It was very crudely put, but a kind of interesting question. The Middle East is not necessarily, like I say this with a little bit of a caveat. The Middle East is not a shithole until about the past 10 years. Up until then, the Middle East was actually a pretty nice place. Like, a lot of people would be pretty amiss to believe that because, you know, throughout most people's lives, well, at least here recently over the past decade, or really 2 decades for that matter, the entire place has looked horrendous. But back in the day, before the 80s and really the 90s and the 2000s, the Middle East was actually an incredibly nice place and a very stable region. And not only that, it is a supplier of a large amount of the world's oil. And not only that, the United States has a large amount of interests inside of this region and its continued stability for that oil that makes it a little bit more of a difficult nut to crack, because we don't want the Iranians to then destabilize completely to the point that all of these organizations, these proxy organizations, start to go rogue and do whatever they want, because then things could become a lot worse and things could become a lot more hairy, a lot more difficult to deal with, and we really wouldn't know what would end up happening and where that would go. And it's a bit of the unpredictability with that makes people a little bit uncertain about striking Iran. And also, we don't know if our information is 100% correct about the nuclear weapons development of Iran. They may actually have a usable nuclear weapon ready for testing right now. We don't really know, and that's another thing about the uncertainty that makes it a little bit more difficult to just give the order to start striking folks and blasting them away inside of Iran. But at the same time, I feel like we're kind of met with a situation where that has to be done. Either Israel needs to start conducting airstrikes against Iran, which the United States should fully support, or the United States needs to start conducting airstrikes against Iran with possible cooperation with the Israelis. I think that that is something that is just necessary going forward in the region, even if there is a possible factor of destabilization, because if not, the Iranians are going to destabilize it on their terms, on their own favor. And I would rather see an American destabilization occur than an Iranian-based destabilization, because if a destabilization is going to occur with the United States, it's going to be kind of what we've seen in the past. It's going to be raw chaos that we end up having to manage and control. But with the Iranians, if they destabilize the region, it's not raw chaos that just has to be tampered down. It is raw chaos with a purpose to further an Iranian objective within the region. And that's why I would have to say that if chaos is going to once again arise within the Middle East, it needs to be an American-created chaos instead of an Iranian one, because it would better suit the region and also the Western interests in the long term. And it also makes... and amen at that. But I'm seeing here a lot of people saying stuff in the chat, and I want to make sure to read it because some people are saying this. Smog said, Beirut was beautiful. I was in Bekaa Valley when the shit hit the fan back in the 70s. We actually know some people who are who actually lived during the Lebanese Civil War when it began. They said they are very proud of Lebanon. They always say that Lebanon was the Switzerland of the Middle East, and a whole bunch of nice things about it. A lot of people would never even imagine that because it's so far removed from the modern day. Because Lebanon was kind of one of the first countries to fall in a sense, in the Middle East. It actually collapsed in the very early 80s, really the late 70s, really, is when Lebanon started to go into a decline and decay. And nowadays, Lebanon doesn't look at all like it used to back during the earlier, well, the middle part of the 20th century. Many other countries have ended up going to the wayside as well. Syria, interestingly enough, was actually a very stable and fairly successful country within the area until 2011. And of course, everyone knows what it looks like now. It is a war-torn hellhole in Syria, and Iraq was largely okay and fairly stable, or not really prosperous, but fairly stable, up until the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And then because of how things were mismanaged after the invasion, which we can just kind of admittedly say was mismanaged, because there was a specific model that the United States used in other areas, like Grenada, where we would have a certain amount of U.S. forces per a certain amount of civilians. And in Iraq, we really stretched that to its limit, where there was one U.S. soldier for every, I think it was like 60 Iraqi civilians. I believe in Grenada, we had one U.S. soldier for every 10 or 12 civilians in Grenada. So when we did that in Iraq, we ended up having this massive shortage of manpower where we couldn't really hold down the entire country. And because of that, lawlessness would prevail. Any sort of anti-American or anti-Western groups really had a run-of-the-mill wherever U.S. forces weren't at, and were able to gather up weapons and supply them to other forces that would end up attacking the United States the entire time we were in Iraq, and the entire time we set up the interim government and were trying to transition Iraq into a modern-day democracy. That was kind of why everything ended up falling apart in Iraq post-invasion. But that's really why Iraq has been in a kind of a little bit of a state of decline recently. Saudi Arabia is actually fairly successful, and so are many other countries like Kuwait, Qatar, the UAE, and Bahrain, because these countries largely got the holdover of being spared the destruction that has come to other areas in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia really just avoided the destruction because their country is run with an iron fist, especially after, and many people don't know this, man. Did you know this? There was a actual siege that happened at Mecca at the I forgot what this thing is called. It's I'm going to call it the Black Rock because I forgot the legitimate name. I know someone's about to say it. But this giant mosque area here around the rock, I forgot what that rock thing is called. I'm so sorry, everyone. But they actually had a siege here in the late 70s, and after that, that's when Saudi Arabia began to be ruled with an iron fist, and their laws became a lot more draconian, at least by a Western sense.
So they had a siege around the rock, and it went sideways.
It went really sideways. A couple of folks came to this place. They believed that that the leader of their group was the return of a guy in Islamic prophecy who was going to be bringing about the end times. They began the siege, and by Islamic law, you cannot bring arms or weapons into the area of this mosque. Like, it's completely forbidden, and you're not a Muslim anymore if you do that. So they actually had to figure out how to fight these people without sending in the Saudi Arabian armed forces, so that way all of them ended up not being pretty much excommunicated from the Islamic faith. So they ended up calling up the GIGN in France, and according to the story or the legend and how it goes, the entire GIGN group that ended up fighting inside of this mosque either coordinated with the Saudis and told them how to fight them, and then they got non-Muslims to fight inside the mosque, or the entire GIGN group converted to Islam because, you know, it didn't matter if they ended up not being Islamic in the end. It just mattered that they had to go in there. But at the same time, a non-Muslim can't enter the mosque. So while they were not going to be Muslims by the end because they'll be breaking Islamic law, it didn't matter. So that's at least how the story went. They ended up fighting these guys. The leader of the group was like, I'm immortal, check this out. He literally walked out into the middle of a hallway, got mowed down, and then his entire group was like, shit, he is not the guy in the prophecy, we give up. And so then they gave up. But after that, the Saudi government went through massive changes in what could be called reforms, but that's why nowadays in Saudi Arabia you see things like the public beheadings and stuff, because before 1976 that didn't really happen a lot anymore. Saudi Arabia was actually considered a fairly progressive country at the time, kind of a lot like Iran before the Islamic Republic took over inside of Iran.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that personally.
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. There's actually a lot that happened in the Middle East during the 20th century that shaped what it looked like today. But because of that iron fist rule that was brought in by the late 70s in Saudi Arabia, they largely avoided a lot of the decay and destruction that happened in the northern area of the Middle East that everyone always knows about. And then, of course, the UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain are largely neutral. They're kind of just trading powers. And so for that reason, they're incredibly prosperous in the modern sense, and also the oil really does help out a lot as well. I think Kuwait, we all know about Kuwait, fairly neutral. The only time they ever had any destruction even get close to them was during the Gulf War, and then after that, nothing really touched them, and so Kuwait's a fairly nice place as well. But that's kind of how the Middle East works, and we don't want, like, right now, from what we know, this area of the Middle East has been pretty much avoiding the destruction that's been facing the northern region, is under peril at the moment from Iran, because that organized chaos that I'm talking about that Iran is trying to produce is targeted towards these countries, especially because most of them are slightly American or completely American aligned. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least with the whole reason why we would be interested in making sure that this region is not destabilized, because not only is it important for the Western economy to secure the oil that flows out of this region, but we also have a large amount of security interest here as well, in general, for strategic reasons, making sure to deny the Russians and the Chinese an ability to get their foot in the door. But with that, I hope that does address everything I can about that. And thank you so much once again, Brian Morgan, for supporting this channel and sponsoring that live chat question, because it's a part of the world I don't really get to talk about that much. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to Andy L, the longtime channel legend, and he put in a $50 donation and also a $30 donation as well. One of them did not have a comment attached, but Andy, thank you very much for the super sticker there on the $30 super chat, and also on the $50 super chat, Andy L said, "For BC Skyman and the loss of his family member." And I agree. Also, rest in peace to Jerry, who is BC's brother, because he did pass away here just a short while ago. So I hope that he rests in peace. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to say that as well. I thank you for the support, Andy L. And I would also have to say rest in peace to Jerry. BC Skyman knew him incredibly well. It's terrible to hear of the passing of a family member. And I hope that BC Skyman is being helped out through these fairly rough times, through the entirety of the Lee Spring Army. Of course, everyone gives their condolences to BC Skyman and the rest of his family that such an unfortunate passing occurred, and hopefully everyone remembers to cherish their family members while they're around, because they're not going to be around forever. And sometimes, while it's a bit of a bittersweet thing, well, not really a bittersweet thing, it's a very sad thing to have the passing of a family member, it's a little bittersweet as well, because it always reminds you to appreciate and cherish the family members that you still have around. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Andy L, and once again giving your condolences to BC Skyman and the loss of Jerry. Very unfortunate to hear. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running and making this channel possible. And with that, we are on to the last question of this question segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the Ukraine war frontline news.
All right, and this one is going to go to Jocelyn White, who puts in a $25 donation. And also, a huge shout out to Josh. And also, it's good to see you once again, and thank you very much for supporting the channel. And she said, "Long live the LSA. Thanks for all the hard work, and take one from the chat."
And thank you so much, Jocelyn White, for being a part of the LSA. Thank you for enjoying the hard work. We put in our heart and souls into this channel, and we will make sure to take a live chat in honor of you, Jocelyn White. And so, Matthew, what kind of a live chat do we have?
So this live chat question right here is going to go to, let's see here. It's going to go to Barry Woodward, who says, "What is the range on the Israeli F-35?
Let me see here if we can find that. The F-35I. We want to find the F-35I. There we go. All right, so here is our F-35I Adir. This is what it looks like. Looks kind of like any other F-35, really. But let me see if we can find some exact stats on the Israeli F-35. So, let's see here. United States. Let's see. Introduction of a plug-and-play feature. Cool. Let's see here. F-35, F-35 electronic warfare. So it seems as though right now, from what I'm reading, it's mostly electronic warfare modifications. And so apparently they also want a two-seater F-35, which is really interesting. Let's see. Israeli F-35s, helmet-mounted displays were also to be manufactured in Israel. This is part of the offset agreement provided to Israel, in spite of the purchase being entirely funded by American aid, meaning that this is actually really interesting. The Israelis are not spending, according to this statement, a single dime on these F-35s. It is entirely the American taxpayer that is carrying the burden of providing these F-35s. Now, I want to say that really quickly because a lot of people, as many know, make a huge stink about the United States supporting Ukraine, about how it's so expensive and it's prohibitive. But if we pull up this F-35 deal, Matthew, that of us giving these F-35s to Israel, I'm sure that it's going to trump the amount that we give to Ukraine in a single year. Let me go pull that up. The U.S.-Israeli F-35 deal. Let's see. Israel will get the jets at a rate of 3 to 5 per year under the terms of the $3 billion agreement. Let's see here. What is the F-35? So
also, thank you all for the massive support tonight. By the way, it's massive support.
Dang, and I was looking on another tab right there. Goodness gracious! I got to say, thank y'all really for the massive support. That is insane. But apparently, for 25 F-35s, Matthew, it cost $3 billion. It's a $3 billion agreement that we gave to the Israelis. We said, we will spend $3 billion and y'all will get 25 F-35s. Nothing is expected in return. And the Israelis went, yeah, that sounds like a fair deal. It's like, you know, I just got to...
You said $3 billion for how many F-35s?
25 of them.
25 for $3 billion. And we've funded Ukraine with about $100 billion plus, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
I just don't understand. It's like, what values are we using on the equipment that we're sending to Ukraine? Because most of the equipment we send to Ukraine is stuff that we were already using, and we simply donated secondhand equipment to the country of Ukraine. And then we went to the defense manufacturers in the United States and invested in them to develop new equipment to give back to us in the United States. I just don't understand. Like, when you say $3 billion for 25 of the top high-end jets, it's just hard to fathom. We've given Ukraine $100 billion, but yet they have no fighter jets yet. And even the F-16 hasn't shown up. That was supposed to be there, I think a day or two ago.
Well, really quickly, let me do some math here. So we got $3 billion divided by 25. So that comes out at a cost of $120 million US per aircraft. And that's
kind of cheap.
That is actually kind of cheap compared to what I thought the F-35 would cost. A lot of people are going to be blown away by that, but I thought it would be a little bit more expensive than that. But that is still absolutely insane to hear that the F-35 only costs $120 million. But that is also pretty insane that people fight and gnash their teeth over giving support to Ukraine when Ukraine is asking for support, when we pretty much gave a unilateral deal to Israel to just give away $3 billion of F-35s, and they didn't even really want... y'all see what I'm saying there? Like, you see what I'm trying to get at? Because with Ukraine, everyone keeps on going, oh, we can't spend any money on Ukraine. Do it as a lend-lease. And then with Israel, we literally go, oh, we would like for them to have F-35. So would you like them? We'll pay for them 100%. Like, and hell, we'll even bend our own rules. Like, we don't want people to mess with the F-35, but we'll even let y'all install your own electronic warfare equipment and anything else you want. Like, I don't know if I'm getting this across, but it seems to me like there's a lot of hypocrisy when it comes to foreign support for different countries. Like, how in the world, like I just want to put this out there. How in the world is it that Israel can get all kinds of stuff and the United States will pretty much foot the entire bill, but when it comes to us providing stuff to Taiwan or Ukraine, everyone wants to act like we're short on money at that point. That is
Also, real quick, I see people in the live chat saying something. I saw some people laughing at the fact that I said only $125 million for an F-35. I gotta say, to me, I'm going to stick with that. The F-35 being $125 million, if that figure is accurate, that is insanely cheap, in my opinion. Because that is one of the highest-end, most modern fighters out there right now. And, it has stealth capability, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is a stealth multi-role aircraft.
Yeah, so this thing right here is top of the line. For it to be a 125 million, that's not bad at all because there's a lot of other stuff that costs way more than that in my opinion is not as advanced as this jet right here. So to obviously though in normal people terms, 125 million, that's crazy. But if we're talking about military spending, we're talking about the big spenders. That's not too bad.
Yeah, I would have to say that's not too bad at all. But let me try and get you all the range because that was the original question that we were on. We were trying to get the range of the aircraft. But really quickly, I'm going to pick up on the whole foreign policy thing in a second again. Because it's one thing that I've got to admit, it really missed me looking at that and being like, what? Wait, they didn't even want it. We just gave them $3 billion of F-35s just because we wanted them to have them. So let's see here. The range of an F-35 without in-air refueling is around 1,700 miles. So we can actually do most of the trip without requiring refueling, but there would have to have been an aerial tanker somewhere along that route to refuel them on the flight back. So it has an excessively long range. I don't know if that's with external fuel tanks or if that's just talking about the internal fuel tanks. I'm not really sure, but that is still pretty freaking impressive right there. Also, this aircraft is fairly slow because at high altitude, its top speed is Mach 1.6. To put that in perspective, I believe the F-15, which is a fourth generation aircraft, can reach a speed of about Mach 2.2 or 2.3. But nowadays, top speed like that doesn't really matter at high altitude. It's completely obsolete to really focus on that kind of stuff. So this one's made more so for overall performance in a modern air war environment, although that sounds like a whole bunch of word vomit. But anyways, getting off of that, I hope that does answer that question well about the range of an F-35, dear. I'm assuming it would be the same as a normal F-35, like an F-35A. But that just, I don't know if this makes a lot of sense. I see some people saying that it does in the chat, and I'm seeing some people saying, well, you know, it's about security risks. The thing is that there are massive security risks in different areas of the world. And I will have to say, I completely understand not giving Ukraine the top-end tech at the moment, considering that they're involved in the war. They're not a member of NATO. We don't have a security agreement or a defensive alliance with them. I get not sending them top tech equipment, but at the same time, I also don't understand the fight about not giving them a lot of equipment, because the thing is that Ukraine is on the doorstep of Europe, which is the most important part of the Western sphere outside of the United States. In fact, it's equally important to the United States. There are the two most important areas in the entire Western sphere is Europe and North America. Those are literally the two. I mean, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand are important, but as far as economic and military power, Europe and the United States, both side by side, are unmatched in the Western Alliance on both of those levels. The Asian part of the Western sphere is pretty big and it's pretty powerful, but it doesn't come close to Europe or North America. It's third fiddle out of the three. And so we sit there and we go, why, there's this massive war. It's the biggest one since World War II. It's going on right on the doorstep of the most important part, the other most important part of the Western sphere, and we're going to fight and penny pinch about what we give to Ukraine so that way we can further the Western sphere's interest in one of the most important areas of the world as far as we are concerned right now. And then
that's why I've been saying, man, it looks like the United States is trying to basically just use Ukraine to wear down Russia, because while we've given them a ton of aid and monetary value, like obviously $100 billion, that's a ton of money for any country. You know, we haven't given them the tools, the exact tools, like the F-16 and other types of equipment like that to finish the war off, like literally right now. We haven't done that. So to me, that's pretty telling.
And then another thing, well, this is something that's always blown me away. As far as the funding went, many of you all will know that Congress approved that $60 billion for Ukraine. Then they approved, it was like an insane amount for Israel, wasn't it? It was like 35 billion or something like that. It was literally the amount that they spend every year annually in Israel on their own military. We gave them another 35 billion. And then Taiwan only got like 10 or something. It was like the smallest amount in the entire spending bill. And that is something that I have to say is insane, because we treat Taiwan like it is just one of the most unimportant areas in the world, when as far as the tech industry goes, which is such a crucial part of how the modern Western world works in the world, we treat them third fiddle, and they are the most important country when it comes to that because of TSMC and all of the semiconductors and wafers that are produced in Taiwan, and yet we treat them like third fiddle. And we also treat them like third fiddle when they're literally just off the shore of the second largest economic and military power in the world in a nation, and we still treat them like they're not that important. I don't get it. and also we have to compare what folks are going up against. If we're talking about the abilities of countries that these nations are having to go up against, Taiwan should be prioritized. It should be pretty much hotlined for the support that it gets from America, because Taiwan has to go up against the entire People's Republic of China in an armed conflict. That is going to be tough, because while the People's Republic of China is still technologically behind us a little bit, they're way farther than, say, I don't know, Iran, which is what Israel is dealing with at the moment, or Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas. It doesn't require, the literal surgical like precision in the weaponry that we're giving Israel to deal with those groups. They usually are using pretty cheap and ineffective equipment. But then we look at Taiwan going up against the People's Republic of China, and we go, you know what, we'll give them like some peanuts and maybe a couple of chips, and that's it. And then with Ukraine, which is fighting, of course, a pretty rundown and ragged Russian Federation, but it's still a much bigger risk than Iran and its proxies, then we go, I don't know, we might want to, cut some corners with the support here. Maybe not give them what they need, just give them what we want to give them. And it just... I just don't really get our prioritizations here.
But get this, though. For example, if the goal of the United States is to wear down Russia, which option is going to be better? Which option do you think the U.S. would end up going with if you had the option between providing Ukraine with the equipment they need right now to end the war immediately, like to bring the war to an immediate halt and start pushing the Russians out? And all that would do is destroy the equipment that the Russians currently have. It would be better if the U.S. went and prolonged the war as long as they could to keep Russia weak over a longer period of time, let's say many, many years, instead of letting Russia lose the war and then have plenty of time to rebuild their military and then be a new threat once again. So that's the reason why I think the U.S. is not providing the equipment that we really think Ukraine should get, is because they want to keep Russia weak for a much longer time. And if they gave Ukraine the proper tools, it would be over much quicker, and Russia would be able to rebuild a lot faster as well, which would make them a threat.
I don't think they'd be able to rebuild. I think that a short, devastating war is about as effective as a long, grueling war. And history has shown that, because the Gulf War was as devastating to Iraq post-war, just in the short 6 months that war occurred, as World War I was to Imperial Germany. In the 4 long years that war ended up grinding out. I would say that as long as you're able to defeat your enemy, it doesn't matter whether it takes a long time or a short time, you really achieve what you need regardless, as long as you achieve victory, even if it's quick. That victory achieves as much as a long, grueling war would. And I don't know why we would want a war to keep grinding out in this area of the world. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, if that's what the approach we're going with, it just makes no sense at all that we will want the war to grind on out, or anything along those lines. But I just realized, Matthew, that we are starting to run a little bit short on time, and we need to make sure to get back to the news. But still, I hope that does address that well, Jocelyn White, and thank you so much for sponsoring that live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. It was a very interesting live chat about the range of the Israeli F-35s, and I think it brings up something, in my opinion, that shows that I think the United States needs to stop acting like the Middle East and Israel is the only country in the world that matters when it comes to foreign support. We need to focus on the Trinity. I would call it the Trinity of support. We need to focus on Eastern Europe. We need to focus on the Middle East. I'm not saying, because some people will say, oh, screw Israel, cut all the support and give it to someone else. Why do we do that? Like, why in the world do people in America act like the money is finite? Like, I don't know why people act like that, because we can give away whatever money we want. I don't know if a lot of y'all pay attention to that. It literally just takes people in Congress going, hey, we ought to give them money. And then they just come up with the money. That's how it works largely. And of course we borrow it and all that. That's a whole complicated thing on its own. But beyond that, if we want an area to be able to be supported, it's just a matter of having the willpower. There's no limit to what we can do. And so we need to continue to support Israel, but we also need to support our interests in Eastern Europe, and we also need to support our interests heavily within East Asia. We don't need to be acting like Israel and the Middle East are the only areas where we can give unlimited soup and salad. Unlimited soup and salad, as far as armed support, needs to expand to all crisis points that are currently affecting the Western sphere, and that includes East Asia and Eastern Europe. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. If you like how that sounds, vote for me for president in 2040. That is what you're going to be getting if the situation is still the same by then. But moving on from that and on into our Ukraine war news, we have some really interesting location unknowns today. We got to see a rare turret toss on film. Now, it wasn't really on film for long, but this thing flew. Look at that. That thing is gone.
Whoa. Man, it's got some arc on it, too. I'd give that one, I couldn't see it coming from the ground, I don't think, but I would give that one a 9 out of 10.
Man, I'd say that it was a pretty solid 9 out of 10 as well. I would give it a 9 out of 10. That's a pretty fair assessment. And we also got to hear that the youngest Russian has been killed in the war so far. According to what we have, this fella that you're seeing right here ended up dying today. His name was Yaroslav Lipovsky, and he was literally killed just a month after turning 18 years old. That means that he entered the Russian army at 17 years old, was given some training, was then given some deployment orders with his unit to Ukraine, went to Ukraine, and then died only a month after turning 18. That is pretty sad, and it is starting to show that the Russians are having a manpower issue, because not only were we seeing very old Russian soldiers, we're also seeing exceedingly young Russian soldiers like this one right here. And I got to say that while this is a Russian soldier, and usually we cheer on the detriment of the Russian Federation and its armed forces, because that means that the Western world is seeing victory in Ukraine, it is very unfortunate to hear that folks this young, even if they are on the Russian side, are getting killed in this war, because it's once again showing us that the Russians don't really care about who is getting killed in this war. It is a literal meat grinder as far as they are concerned, and they're willing to throw in even their youth pretty much into this conflict, just so that way they can try and keep the war going on long enough that they might grind down Ukraine in the Western world and end up winning. And I think that's a reason why we should make sure that they don't end up winning, so that way a Russian mindset like that doesn't end up being the ruling mindset within the area of Eastern Europe. It's an unfortunate reality that will continue in this war, but I don't think we should allow the Russians to take over areas like Ukraine and then bring that kind of a mindset into a nation like Ukraine and have that as the prevailing mindset of the leadership in that country. But moving on from that, we also got to see how an M55S, which is a Slovenian-provided T-55 that has been heavily modified, performs when reloading. Check this out. We can see right here the fella in the turret. We see him walking around here. We're actually looking at the bottom of the turret basket, which is at the bottom of the turret. We can see them reloading the main gun here. This looks like this is actually being filmed from the driver's position, possibly.
That looks like a nice seat right there with that cushion.
Man, it really does. I mean, they kind of got this thing a little cushy up in there. You can also see the shells on the side of the turret basket, if you want to call it that.
That damn Carol Baskins.
And we see them fire right there. There was a little bit of fire and flame that came out of the breach right there. Oh, and oh, that was just a shell. It's a little bit of extra burn off. That had me concerned for a second, man. I was like, what the hell? And that's the end of the clip, but really interesting to see the operation of an M55S in combat. But moving on from that, we also got to see that a Russian loaf survived an FPV drone attack and carried the FPV drone with it as proof. The FPV drone ended up getting mangled up in the camo net. Apparently the warhead did not explode for some reason, and it literally was just dragged along on the Buhanka until these guys got out and took a picture of it and found out that an FPV drone was stuck to the back of their loaf. Pretty wild to see, and it looks like these Russians ended up being a little bit lucky, but a lot of Russians actually did not end up being lucky today. The losses were insane.
Oh, gosh, man. The losses are freaking nuts. They didn't breach 1,000 troops today, but 14 Bobcats. That is tremendous to see. That's a big reporting of losses on the Bobcats. I'm telling you what. But tell us, Enforcer, what else did they lose today?
A lot. 990 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 15 APCs, 59 supply trucks, 7 main battle tanks, 22 artillery systems, 34 drones, 1 MLRS, 1 aircraft, according to Miss Disa, if I'm reading that correctly, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and the 14 Bobcat skid steers. The losses were very high, and it's very interesting to see that the Russian Federation is continuing to take massively high losses within the area of Ukraine. But moving on from that and down into the area of the Vovchansk front, we got to see an interesting thing. I called it the Bangalorian. It's kind of like a play on the Mandalorian. It's really a Republic-era Stormtrooper helmet, so I just want to put that out there because I know someone nerd's going to correct me on that. I'm just kidding. You're not a nerd. I know that as well, so you're not a nerd. Don't cry. Don't cry, okay? But This is pretty cool looking. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, dang, that actually kind of looks neat.
That is pretty cool. That's pretty neat. I don't know if that little antenna is functional.
No, like no,
Nah.
nah. But then we also got to see
The Disney lawyers are firing up their jet. They're gonna come out here and teach them a lesson.
dude, the Disney lawyers are scarier than the Russian army at this point. Like, dude, they're gonna be coming up there and like punching them in the gut and stuff. But anyways, here is the 3rd Brigade engaging in Russian forces at close range in the area around Hloboke.
Зараз як будемо залітати, ти їбашиш наліво до комфорта. Я піздую направо на бандані, заберу карандаші. Давай, братан. Давай, давай, давай.
And we now see them moving on
Братан,
along.
по нас плотно 120. Дальше, дальше рух. Там окоп пацанів хороший. Протягуй вправо зразу.
We now see them getting into a small bunker here.
Пушкеримося в острої. Ти виходиш на радійку і кажеш: парні, зараз у вас з тила двигається наша первая рота, 300-е. Двигаемся к вам, к вашей 4-ке. Пытались выйти с ними на контакт, по нам начали стрелять. Ебать, це канає, нахуй, дай я це сніму, блядь. Есть, ведуться? Передай, мы двигаемся к 4-ке.
We see them now hanging out in the tree line here.
Нас двое, один раненый, подстрелили выше. Вон мы, братан. 50 метров, 50 метров.
Oh, dang! Dude, they laying down the heat! They got the PKM out here, man.
Man, they're laying it down.
Man, he's about to pick that thing up again. Yeah! Damn!
Тихо! Родной, тише будь, тише, потерпи.
We now see him reloading the PKM.
Как лоб надо дожать! Братан, по нас плотно пиздует, по нас плотно пиздует.
Где пидоры? Сориентируй, где пидоры? В зеленке, братуха?
Вижу одного, брат.
You see him continuing to lay down fire into that tree line. This man is giving him the business.
Коли уйобує?
Soldiers a machine gun. Okay.
This man knows. Oh, Matthew, look, it's a flag. It's a flag of Geschwind mal like in die Deutschen. But I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh.
І я, сука. Месі, як ти передрягав? У мене пару секунд на GoPro.
Правильно. Все, заебись у тебя.
Воно знімало? Да. Але в мене потім кінчилась, сука, ця. Коротше, коли нас вже іменно з двох сторін зажали, все вже, ну.
Повтори, братуха, не понял.
And with that, that's the end of the clip, but very interesting to see that little firefight that happened near the area of Lukyantsy and Hloboke. Moving on from that, we also get to see that there were some fires and strikes that occurred within the area of Shebekino. Here is the aftermath. Ooh. And here's
The Russian car alarm's always going off, man. It's always causing chaos, like that fella down there in Yemen yelling and screaming.
Oh no! It's like, dude, bro, calm down. But here's the actual attack that happened that created the fire and the smoke. I like how they added in the audio of the drone. But we see that that vehicle was destroyed. Now they're going for another one. Another one. Dang, they went for the fire truck. But anyways, with that, that's the end of the clip. And very interested to see that they are hitting targets within the area around Shebekino. Moving on from that near to Druzhina, we got to see a Swedish supplied archer conducting a fire mission. Would you look at that beautiful creature? That is one hell of an SPG right there. We don't really see a lot of them like that. And I gotta say that it is pretty neat to know that the Swedish Archer is still out there doing its job. Moving on from that and down to the area near Turney, we also got to see some Ukrainian forces that ended up surviving an FPV drone attack. Here's the clip. Well, you see
That is a dirty van right there.
and that van is dirty. We see them driving well as fast as you can. Almost losing
damn.
control.
That van's rocking.
And that thing's rocking and rolling.
Ти цілий?
Музыка.
Так, цілий, пиздуй.
Now, the reason why they're driving this fast and the van looks pretty bad, Matthew, is because an FPV drone flew through the windshield and almost took them all out, but it ended up not exploding, and so it just ended up wrecking the inside of the van, and that was about it.
Man, they're lucky they didn't hit a bigger pothole because it could have been all over.
Man, I'm telling you, man, that driving was concerning, but I understand why. But moving on from that and down to Lysychansk, we also got to see that the Russians are apparently starting to use a cheap Chinese monitor called the Solo Good to intercept and view Ukrainian drone images. Man, that thing is solo good.
Вадим, смотри. Над нами где-то. У краю посадки.
Oh, and they're running.
Вот петух быстрый.
Oh man, it's turning into solo bad.
Да-да.
Solo low.
С морковкой где-то тут в посадке. В пушку хуярит пидор. Выравнивайся, где-то вдалеке.
Man, I like how they can't even do anything with this information. They're just going to watch possible impending doom.
Really?
Выровнялся. Он на пушку смотрит, но не летит. Он где-то сверху, слышь? Разгон начинает. Не вижу.
What the hell is he wearing?
Вон он, петух.
Well, he shot one down, apparently. So maybe it is useful for a little bit of something, but I'm kind of doubting it a little bit.
Где-то отвалился.
He's like, let me poke it so that way we can make sure it blows up. It's like...
Забираем. Нам сегодня везет.
And that's the end of the clip, but a really interesting innovation to see out there. Meanwhile, down near Bakhmut, we got to see a little bit of street fighting happening in the Canal micro district of Chasiv Yar. We're going to have to be muting the lo-fi hip-hop beats here, because for some reason that's always included in combat footage now. But we can see them inside of a building in Chasiv Yar, engaging the Russians. This guy actually has a pretty kitted out AR, and we can see some explosions happening outside as he lifts up the AT weapon, pops it off into the next building, and makes sure to teach them about good old Uncle Sam. When you see him continuing to fire into the building,
Let them have it.
man, they're letting him have everything, man. I'm telling you. Oh, man, I'm telling you.
Oh, look, a door leading to somewhere.
Aw, man, it's the door leading to my channel's demise. Oh, we can see a striker showing up. Dude, that driver popped out like a meerkat. Dude, look at him. Dude, he's just driving up. He went, Poop. Hello. And now we can see them moving around the street near the striker. Actually, that's not a striker. It's like a Spartan or something like that.
He's a Spartan.
Oh, he tripped and fell.
Oh, damn. He twisted them ankles. I wonder what it feels like to be running back toward your unit, and then you just see bullets from your comrade whizzing by, like going toward the enemy. It's like that's got to be a little interesting.
It's got to be a little scary. Man, this guy believes in laying down heat. Like, no joke. It's just always automatic. See him now getting low here. He's crawling along the ground, I think. And that's the end of the clip, but still showing a little bit of that fighting in the area around Chasiv Yar. Meanwhile, a little bit further down the line, we also got to see a drone hitting the Russians as a little treat. And we also got to hear the mystery.
We got some of that fancy music going on, man. Some of that techno mystery beat.
That's like, bro. That's like that train horn.
Is the mystery, though, is these Russians getting absolutely yeeted out here.
Man, I'm telling you something, man. That little sound we heard at the beginning of this clip, that was like that train horn I did for the Class 91 last night where it goes, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
But they were hitting that Russian artillery out there in the area. That
The Ukrainians
squad victim.
leaving, going and hitting the Russians in the two group, bliat. They them in the two group.
Two group. But with that, that is the end of the clip. Beautiful to see. Beautiful. And we're now moving on out of the area of Bakhmut and further on down the line and into the area of Avdiivka, where we got to see the 47th Brigade using some cluster munitions on the Russians. And we're going to be muting that, but we can see the Russians here trying to move their massive-ass supply truck up to a small outpost here with an artillery piece nearby. And we now see them loading up the artillery piece. They're getting ready to move out.
Look at them grouped up, man. The Russians love to group up. Like, it's not even 2 group anymore. It's like 10 group.
Man, those clusters are starting to come down right on top of them, too. Times are not fun anymore for these people.
Oh.
Oh, my.
Peppers.
Ooh, right in the freaking, like, dash cheese, man. Like, one of the clusters just hit right on the hood of the truck. Man, I remember when when everyone was talking about, man, should we give the Ukrainians cluster bombs? And then we gave them cluster bombs. That's just like...
Talking about, oh no, what's the dud rate on those cluster bombs? It's gonna be a disaster. It's like they're fighting for their life. It's like, come on. It's like, yes, there's probably efficacy problems with some of them, but it's like when you're in a fight for your life, the Ukrainians just want anything they can get their hands on. They don't care if it works sometimes or not. They just want to use it.
Dude, it's like I remember people were like, what if they use the cluster bombs and a child picks it up? It's like, it's no man's land. Like, where is a child out there in no man's land, like, picking up bomblets? It's like I don't even know. Like, after the war, maybe. But right now, it's like, that's not even in the question. It's not like Syria, you know, where, like, there's literal people just hanging out in town, a battle happens, and someone ends up cluster bombing them. It's like, it's not Syria, this is Ukraine. It's a very different place. But moving on from that, we did get to see video confirmation of the Su-25 that was shot down yesterday. And there it is. It's that little group of pixels right there that's circled with that red circle. Just to make sure y'all can see it. And it's fallen. Oh,
Really good tracking work with that red circle.
Man, I feel like this is one of those conspiracy videos where, like, an invisible man was caught on film or something like that. It's like with the red circle.
Could it be that this is an alien spacecraft? Or could it be it's some wonder waffle weapon? Watch this 5 minutes of commercials and find out soon.
Dude, like, the History Channel will be like, you see, it wasn't actually ancient people who made these great feats of engineering. Every single one of them is aliens. So did people do anything back then? No, they didn't. They just sat on their asses. The aliens did everything. It's like, what? But anyways, moving on from that clip and out of the Avdiivka area and down near Marinka, we also got to see a BMP-3 getting blown up in pretty fantastic fashion. Bada boom, baby! Little turret toss, little itty bitty one. Bada boom, baby! Little turret toss, little itty bitty one. And that's the end of the clip. That was a pretty impressive blowing up right there of a BMP-3. But I'll tell you what's even more impressive is when we move down the lines and you see that HIMARS missile destroy that Buke in the trees. There's the Buke. It's got one missile left. Only one. And the Ukrainians actually only needed one missile of their own to blow up that Buke. And the Ukrainians are going to give them that old hawk. And
oh, no.
There we go. They got it. Hey!
Oh, man. You call it rebuke.
Yeah. Oh, man. And so is that History Channels for conspiracy theories. It really is nowadays. I don't even know why they call it the History Channel. They got to call it the BS and Conspiracies Channel.
Man, they started realizing the people watching the History Channel were like, we don't want that real history. This is too boring. The ratings started going down. They're like, quick, bring in the conspiracies, quick. And they brought them in. It's like, our channel is saved. Thank goodness.
Dude,
I wonder what the viewership really is on the History Channel these days. Like, you know, they're obviously, they're still on cable. I think at least today they're on cable. But I wonder what the viewership really looks like on the History Channel, like in the modern day.
So let's see. I'm going to pull that up. Let's see here. Can we find? Let's see.
Could it be that the History Channel is no more? Could it be that the aliens built the History Channel and then tore it down?
So apparently the History Channel doesn't get ratings, but there are only 63 million households that have TV plans that can watch the History Channel, like where that's an actual channel you can click over to, as opposed to their peak in 2011 of 99 million households. So it does appear...
Oh, they're still set.
Yeah, so it does appear that they're not really at their peak. Like, they've lost about a third of the people who used to be able to watch the channel, but they still have a pretty good base to tap into if they wanted to. But I'm telling you, man,
Imagine if you just get 1% of that audience, like even 1% of that, and you're pretty much set with the viewership and watching commercials and making your money and stuff like that.
But hear me out though. You know what's crazy about that, Matthew, is that 63 million households could watch History Channel. We get 7 million views or more than that a month on this channel. So it's like that's actually not that bad. Like, you know, like compared to History Channel and stuff, it's like that's actually not that bad. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we did get to see one of those M1117s having a little overheating issue on the side of the street. Yeah, it happens. And with that,
you know, when you bring out the shirtless dudes, they're about to do some work.
Man, that's like the redneck skin. Wow, oh my God, dang it, Baba! It looks like we had a radio over here. You know that thing's gonna get fixed. You know that for sure. But we also got to see a Russian T-72 get blown up today. All right, we're gonna be muting that. But we can see that little T-72 out there cooking, and that thing's about to be blowing up. And it sadly blew up off camera, but you can see the aftermath.
Oh, man, it went quite not very well for them.
Man, it did not go well, but hey, it's not a pissing contest. But moving on from that and down into the Kherson, we also got to see a Russian camp that got hit as well. I'm just having to make sure to review this a second time. You know what? I'm gonna hold this one because I think it might be a little spicy. But if you don't want to check it out, link is in the description below. But a Russian camp did get hit, and it looks like the damage was somewhat significant. But without further ado, it's time for us to move to Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 878 of The Wire. And so, without further ado, wait a minute, they're not telling me that the last time he made a speech was the 17th of July.
It can't be possible. Please, I would like a more modern speech. I want speech from today. Can we get a real speech? A real speech.
We want speech. Real speech. Long-lasting speech. Let me see here if I can find it. Let's see here. Videos. Hello? Hello? Wait, where is it?
Please, we had a speech.
We have to have speech. We have to have real speech. Long-lasting speech. Are you kidding me?
No speech?
No speech. Like, again, like, it's interesting. This is the longest streak of no speeches we've had ever. But Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. Sadly, we didn't have one tonight, but hopefully we'll have one soon. But with that, it is time for us to move on into the second segment of the stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all, and boy howdy, is it a fun segment. And of course, we get to talk to so many of y'all. We know at this point with accuracy that YouTube is underreporting our streaming number, because tonight they said that we reached a peak of 5.8 thousand people, but 45,000 people have watched this stream live. That would suggest to me and Matthew that there is about, at this moment, probably 6,000 people here with us live, although YouTube's only reporting 4.3 thousand. YouTube's been doing this for about a week at this point. I'll be honest with y'all, it aggravates me greatly, because while it doesn't matter how many people are here, I would like to actually know how many people are here, just because it, you know, makes me have a good sound state of mind to know how many people are actually here. I just like to know it. Like, is there something wrong with wanting to know? Like, I'm just kidding with y'all, but still, it's a little aggravating to see that. But beyond that, while we can't see a good amount of y'all who are here with us right now, we are very happy to have y'all here. We love having y'all here every single night. Hopefully y'all have enjoyed it so far. There's still a lot more to go. So if you have enjoyed it, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Stick around with us, because we run these kinds of news summaries every single night. Like, it's a 6-day-a-week thing. We only take Mondays off, and that's a mandatory fun day that we take off just to make sure that we are well rested and ready to go another 6 days. And what's crazy is that Matthew did a little check before the stream tonight, and we are like the only people in the Ukraine war world that are even here today. Like, everyone else is taking a holiday, apparently. Like, no one else is running a stream, uploaded a video, or anything for that matter that we know about, which is Really weird. So we're like the only people on YouTube right now who are holding down the fort and covering this news practically daily. But if you enjoy that, make sure to subscribe, because we never compromise on that arrangement or that belief. We do this literally without end. And so with that, Matthew, it is time for us to move on into that interesting question that you've asked everyone, and it's time for us to also start talking about the interesting questions and statements that folks have made in the chat tonight. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and it's now time for that part of the stream. It is that guy, pal. It is the last part of the stream, the question segment, and we have one more poll question to address. It says, in your opinion, is the world moving closer to a global conflict, or are tensions cooling? It looks like only about 12% said that tensions are starting to cool off, while 16% said that things are staying relatively stable, and about 64% said they believe the risk of a global conflict is starting to increase. And on this question, like I always say, I try not to sound like I'm doom and gloom and stuff like that, because we want to be positive here. Yeah, we don't want to sound like that hot dog man out there. He's depressing to even listen to. He'll send you into depression if you didn't have it before, if you listen to him. But I would honestly say I'm with the 64%. It doesn't look like things are really cooling off whatsoever. And in fact, the Middle East is on the brink of war once again. It had cooled down for a while after Iran had attacked Israel. It had kind of cooled down a little bit, but now it's going right back to the way it was, with Israel attacking Yemen, and now the proxies vowing a very strong revenge. So even in that region, it's going off, it's popping off. Also, the Russia-Ukraine war is still popping off at full speed, and we also still have North Korea and South Korea doing a tit-for-tat with petty moves. So all the way around, it's not looking good. So to me, I would say the risk is increasing. Not saying there's a guarantee that something's going to happen, but it certainly it looks a little, unstable at the moment. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I don't really think that the risk of a world war is increasing. I'd actually say it's relatively stable, because there's always major events going on in every corner of the world that would make one think that world war is on the horizon. Like, for example, the Korean War. When the actual communist Chinese got involved back in the 50s, that looked like the Third World War was going to begin right then and there. The war in Vietnam at some points actually looked like it was going to start heating up, or even for that matter, just rising tensions within the area of the Iron Curtain during the Cold War looked as though World War would begin right then and there. The Cuban Missile Crisis looked like World War would begin right there and then. Operation Able Archer in 1985 was another moment where a lot of people thought that a World War was going to begin right then and there. When the USS, I forgot what the ship was that was hit, but with the ship that was hit by the mine that set off Operation Praying Mantis with Iran, a lot of people thought that a World War might begin right then and there. In fact, if you ever look back at some of the movies made in the time, you can get an idea of why people thought a World War would be happening. And one thing that's really interesting is that there's this British movie called Threads, which was made by the BBC Channel 1, I believe, and it was a movie about a hypothetical scenario where the world ended up having a nuclear onslaught, pretty much, and the aftermath that would follow. So it isn't really about the actual bombs falling, it's really the aftermath of the bombs falling. But the way that they laid out the movie was that the United States attempted a coup attempt against the Islamic Republic of Iran just years after the government was founded, after the overthrowing of the Shah in 1979. U.S. forces ended up landing and capturing an area of southern Iran in Isfahan. The Russians then decided to move in and try and protect the Iranians, and ended up conducting limited strikes against the United States. The United States ended up flying in some bombers, I believe, and then they ended up getting hit by a nuclear surface-to-air missile. Those do exist, by the way. And it pretty much wiped out a large amount of the bomber wing. And so then things were getting so tense that there were buildups on the Iron Curtain, and then finally the nuclear holocaust came, and then ended up pretty much wiping out most of civilized life in the Northern Hemisphere. And so that is something at the time that showed a lot of people were thinking that just the situation involving Iran and how tense that was in between the Soviet Union and the United States may possibly even lead to a third world war right then and there, at least in the public opinion. I would say that it always looks like, the world always looks like, to be entirely honest, that we're always on the brink of some major world war. I would actually say it's probably the same as it always has been. And of course, I've kind of flipped in between statements throughout the course of this war, saying that it really does look like we're on our way, and it really doesn't, because it kind of comes on a day-to-day basis, you know, just off of what you're seeing from day to day. What does it look like it's going to keep on turning into? And right now, I'd have to say, with the trash balloon thing happening with Korea, which is kind of like that normal petty stuff that happens in between those two countries, and the tensions in between Taiwan and China, which had been worse at times. Back in the 90s, the Chinese actually fired missiles at Taiwan through the Strait of Taiwan, and the United States ended up sending 2 aircraft carrier task forces into the area to stop the Chinese from actually beginning a full-blown war. So the tensions in between China and Taiwan have been higher in the past, crazily enough. And then in the Middle East, of course, we've seen worse times and situations in the Middle East. I would argue that just a few years ago, when ISIS was controlling a large portion of Syria and Iraq, we were probably closer to a regional conflict. Well, we were in a regional conflict then than we ever are close to right now. And then in Eastern Europe, of course, this is an unprecedented situation in Eastern Europe, really since World War II. So this area is incredibly tense, but still, we have been playing this game in Eastern Europe well enough that it isn't going to be evolving into a full-blown major conflict in between the West and Russia anytime soon, at least. So going off of that, I would say it's probably the same as it has been for a while. I would say that it's not really a point of considerable concern. I would say, of course, people have a reason to be concerned, but I wouldn't say that folks need to be stocking up on food or anything like that, preparing for a world war that may be coming, because I still think it's about as far away or as close as it has been pretty much the entire time since the end of World War II. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion and my take on it. And with that, it is time for us to get on back into those live chat questions. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so it's now time to jump right back into our super chat questions. We have a lot of really good ones tonight. A lot of massive support, actually, and huge thanks to everybody who supported the channel tonight. And our first one here is going to go to Purple Gerbil, who throws in a $100 donation. Absolutely massive support, and we appreciate it very much, Purple Gerbil. They said, for BC Skyman and the LSA, and do you think that Saudi Arabia will determine the response to Iran and keep up the good work?
And thank you so much for that massive support, Purple Gerbil. And it's wonderful to see so many people giving massive support in their words to BC Skyman tonight. Of course, I'm sure he greatly appreciates it. I see him in the live chat right now. But as far as the Middle East goes, Saudi Arabia is, I would say, as far as the Islamic world is concerned, they are pretty much par on par with the Iranians, which is actually a really interesting thing, is that right now there are 3 nations in the Middle East that are kind of contending to be the leaders of the faith, if you want to call it that, in the future. One is Iran, with the Ayatollah and all that. The other one is Saudi Arabia, simply because they have a large amount of Islamic holy sites within their territory. And not only that, they pose an ideological opposition to the Iranians within the Islamic world. They're also a part of a different sect of Islam. And then you have Turkey. And Turkey is officially on a religious level. They're actually, the government is completely separated from the state. Instead of it being freedom of religion like it is here in the West, in Turkey it's freedom from religion, meaning that it's actually outlawed in Turkey officially to even show any kind of religious clothing in the government. Like the wearing of a hijab through most of Turkey's modern history was actually outlawed within the Turkish National Assembly because it was a religious symbol of a sort, or it was religious clothing, which all of those things are completely forbidden within the Turkish government, because Ataturk, who founded the modern Republic of Turkey, shaped and formed a lot of how Turkey operated off of France. And France actually has, as a provision in its constitution, the legal division of the church and state, and completely frees the government from any form of religious expression at all. Which is something that I have to bring up that is a very big difference, because here in America, there is freedom of religion, meaning that you can practice your religions, whatever religion you would like, or no religion, and the U.S. government, according to the First Amendment, if I'm correct, will not make any form of support for any form of religion officially. But still, if you are a religious person, you can openly say that within the government. Like if you're a representative and you're a Christian or a Muslim, you can say I'm a Christian or I'm a Muslim, and for these reasons I want to pass this kind of a bill. But you can't make a law saying that the official religion of the country is this, or giving a religion special forms of privileges within the United States. That's illegal. But in countries like France and Turkey, you can't even say anything in the government like I'm a Christian or I'm a Muslim. That's actually outlawed. It's forbidden. And you can't wear any kind of religious imagery. So if you have like a necklace with a cross on it, that is illegal in the French National Assembly, and it is in the Turkish National Assembly as well, at least on a legal form. But there's a caveat to that in the modern day. It's kind of like, it's on the books, but not really recognized in Turkey. But it's a very big difference in between how the French democratic system works and how British-based democratic systems work. Because British-based ones are the freedom of religion concept. The French models are freedom from religion. And it's a very, very minute-sounding difference in how it's said, but it's actually a really big difference in how it's performed in practice. But beyond that, Turkey is still trying to vie to be the leader of the Islamic faith going forward. Erdogan is trying to position Turkey to kind of bring back the caliphate that was destroyed in the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and try and be a leader of the region in the creation of its mini-sphere, which we've talked about a lot on this channel. But Saudi Arabia probably would not be, although it's trying to be a bit of a religious leader in the area, it probably would not end up being a major war setter or trend setter within the area on what would happen with Iran. Saudi Arabia kind of sits back and lets the United States do most of the plays in the game that happen in the Middle East. They're just more than happy to really maintain their stability because for Saudi Arabia, their main priority is stability. It isn't necessarily trend setting or trying to become the actual leader of the faith, if you want to call it that. So I would generally say that they probably will not end up sanctioning or condemning any kind of actions against Iran. They'll probably just sit back and take a backseat to whatever America and Israel want to do and not condemn it, but they won't openly support it either because they're just going to, that's generally what Saudi Arabia does. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well about that Purple Gerbil. And thank you so much once again for support. I hope that was a very interesting rabbit hole because one thing that's really interesting, and of course I want to say this, we have a rule on this channel about no politics and no religion, so we don't make any statements supporting or condemning any political groups or any religious groups. I will say though, open disclaimer, I am a Christian, just for y'all to know. Matthew is as well, because some people may be like, well, are you an atheist or something? That I will say, I am a Christian. I can't really be ashamed of that. It is what it is. But beyond that, as far as the Middle East goes, the ideological side of things with Islam is a very important thing that has to be talked about because unlike other areas, dang BC Skyman, good lord, thank you so much for that support. That is unbelievable, and we will get to that here in a second. But usually I don't talk about a lot with religion, especially because most of what we talk about deals with the Western sphere, and because the Western sphere works the way it does, and there is freedom of religion or freedom from religion throughout the entirety of it, and religious ideology doesn't really play a major factor in decision making, we never even have to bring it up at all, which is generally what I prefer. But in the Middle East, considering that the ideological argument is such a major one, considering that the Islamic world is still trying to find their way forward, even 100 years after the collapse of the Ottoman Caliphate at the end of the Ottoman Empire, it is actually a little bit of an important thing to talk about with how the region works, because every country kind of has a little bit of a different idea of how they would like the way forward to be, and then you have the major trendsetters like Saudi Arabia and Iran, and then an emerging Turkey within the area as well. And all of them are using they're using the ideological arguments, not necessarily to try and fight over their actual ideological differences, is more so being used as an extension to try and draw more power, as different forms of ideological arguments start to appeal to different sects of Islam. Good Lord. But thank you so much for that support, Jesus the Lord and Savior. But beyond that, I would have to say, generally, it's not really about trying to fight and argue about the ideological differences to have one win over the other because they believe that their way is the true way. It's more so for each country, if you really look at the underlying reasons for it, it's trying to build up a sphere of influence or have a lot of sway within the region. For Saudi Arabia, it's trying to have sway. For Turkey, it's actually trying to create an economic mini-sphere that they will be the center of. And then for Iran, it actually is because they believe that their ideology is superior to the others within the area. Although their sect of Islam is pretty much only practiced within Iran and a small area of Iraq. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. It's a very in-depth thing to talk about the Middle East as a whole, especially because you have the ideological differences of play, and it's a major part of how they act in the modern world. But I hope that that does address that at least fairly well on my shallow understanding. And there's still a lot to read about and learn about in that area. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, so we've gotten some absolutely crazy super chats tonight, and our next one here is a $400 donation from Jesus' Lord and Savior, and thank you very much for that massive support. That is insanely large support, and we appreciate that very much. And they put in the pray emoji and also the great job emoji, the football goal emoji.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Jesus, Lord and Savior, and helping this channel to keep on running. That is unbelievable, massive support, and I cannot thank you enough for that. I'm assuming that you really enjoy this channel, and just love it to bits and want to see it to keep on running. And that kind of unbelievable, massive support will certainly help us to keep this thing running and rolling. And so I got to thank you massively once again for that support and helping this channel be possible. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here and keep this channel running. And so with that, thank you massively once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Jesus is Lord and Savior. And thank you once again for just an unbelievable support. I'm actually gobstopped, Matthew, from that support. That is huge. That is just like $100 short of the max that YouTube allows. And then I think they actually reached the max tonight. But still, huge thanks to you once again. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is another massive super chat. This one is a $210 donation from BC Skyman, the channel legend, who makes a return once again. And also, it's very good to see you once again, BC Skyman, and I hope things are going okay considering the circumstances. He said, I want to thank everyone that prayed for Jerry, and he is with our Savior now, and that was his legacy to tell everyone the good news. And great job, Enforcers, and the LSA, and Slava Ukraine. And once again, rest in peace to Jerry. I'm very sorry to hear that, BC Skyman. And also, I'm sure you saw me down in the comments on your video giving condolences as well. So I was very saddened to hear that, and I hope that everyone's doing okay, and also thoughts and prayers as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say, welcome back, BC Skyman. I have to say as well, huge condolences to you about the passing of Jerry. I know that must be a tough thing to go through. Luckily, with time, the wounds will heal, because it's always a very it's a very sad thing to lose family members. We've lost family members in the past who have, of course, passed away from some sort of affliction or an ailment or a disease, and it's terrible to think about. After a while, though, what's weird, and you know, maybe you have some experience with it as well, BC Skyman. But what's weird is that after several years, it almost seems like a distant memory. Like, I don't know about you, Matthew, but like with the passing of especially one of our grandfathers, because we were there when he passed, that it almost feels like a different world. It almost feels like it was a forever ago, although it wasn't that long ago. It was about 6 years ago. But it's so weird because it was such a emotional time. It was a very sad time, but then it just eventually, over time, it just ends up being a part of a story. Because I always wondered, you know, if you know, if I can talk about this for a minute, I've always wondered, because whenever you talk to really, really old people, I'm talking about folks who are in their 90s and stuff, they'll always be like, oh yeah, Jimmy was a funny guy. Yeah, he died about 20 years ago. And they'll say it as like a matter of fact thing. And it's not even anything that sounds sad or anything like that. It's just a fact. The guy died. And I'm always like, how in the world did people justify that in their head? You know, because, you know, being younger, you always think that there has to be some reverence and sadness in the statement that someone died or passed away. But older folks, really, really old folks, I mean, they are not fazed by that at all. There's like, oh yeah, he died. One day I'll die. You know, and it's like, dang, it's like that's a very straightforward way of looking at it. You know, you got to respect it. But at the same time, I always wondered how, and until we had family members pass away, and then it's years later, and then you end up just kind of talking about it a little matter of fact as well, because it's just a thing that happened. Time heals the wound, and you know, it was just a part of life's story. But that is still unfortunate to hear about the passing of Jerry, and I hope that time does heal the wounds. But it's still something to look back at, although it feels like another world, to look back at that chapter of life and think about all the things that you did with them, or you know, said with them, and if there was a pretty decent departure with them when they passed, you know, you can always think about that and be like, oh, that was a good way to wrap things up. Because with our granddad, there was actually a couple of days, because he had congestive heart failure. So there was a couple of days where we knew, because the doctor said he was going to die at this point, there was nothing that could be done. There was a couple of days where all the amends could be made, all of the nice things could be said, and it was kind of like the perfect wrapping up of things, if you want to put it that way. That was a very lucky thing, actually, because some people don't get that kind of closure sometimes on sorts of things like that. But still, very big condolences to you. And I don't know why in the world I went on that whole philosophical route about death and all that, but I hope that that may help out in some way, at least some of that, maybe BC Skyrim. But still, it's a little bit sad to hear that it was his legacy to tell everyone the good news. We try and tell everyone the good news here on this channel. It sounds like Jerry and us had a lot in common, actually. But still, thank you so much once again for saying that we do a great job. We try our best. And I've seen nothing but an overflowing of support and compassion for BC Skyman from everyone here in the Lee Spring Army in the live chat. And that is incredibly commendable and incredibly kind of y'all for sure. And so with that, I thank y'all so much once again for the amazing support. I have to thank you for the amazing support as well, BC Skyman. And once again, my condolences go out to you and the loss of Jerry. That is incredibly sad to hear. And I hope that things continue to go on the up and up, and time heals all wounds, such as it does. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next super chat here is going to go to LSA Rocks, who's also a channel legend as well. And also, thank you very much, LSA Rocks, for that $50 support and supporting the channel in a very big way, and we appreciate it very much. He says, I will match for BC and take one from the live chat, please.
And thank you so much for the support, LSA Rocks. And thank you for saying that you will match for BC. Of course, BC Skyman has been on everyone's minds lately, of course, with the unfortunate news that we've heard. And I hope that I know that BC Skyman is appreciating it. He's actually saying it in the chat. And I'm glad to know that everyone's been giving him nothing but the kindest of words, the greatest of condolences. It's a sad thing to know that someone's passed, but it's beautiful to see that so many people can get together in the Lee Spring Army like they have for 878 days now and be one of the most kind and compassionate communities I've ever seen. I mean, there's not a single bad bone in the Lee Spring Army that I've ever seen. And it's a very respectable thing to see that everyone has nothing but the kindest of words to say to BC Skyman. But still, thank you so much once again for support, LSA Rocks, and we will make sure to take one from the live chat.
All right, so that question from the live chat is going to go to Melanie16040, who says, has there been an increased radiation detected somewhere nearby to the Rostov nuclear power plant? Because that would rule out a nuclear refueling, and perhaps maybe that's the reason why the reactor shut down.
You would think that. We don't really have any radiation readings from around Volgodonsk, which is the nearest town. It would be that power plant's version of Chernobyl. We don't have any readings from the nearby area, so we actually do not know a lot about the condition of the power plant. All we know is that it's offline. You would assume that it's refueling. I mean, that would seem reasonable. But if it was, the Russians would probably just say that it's refueling, because it's not really a hidden thing when a power plant refuels. Like hell, even in Alabama, our Farley and Browns Ferry power plants, which are the two nuclear power plants here in Alabama, it's pretty public news whenever they are conducting refueling efforts. And so it's not really hidden. It's usually in the local papers or maybe even in state papers. So I believe that it would probably be the same in Russia, because it's not really like that's a top secret kind of thing when a power plant conducts a refueling operation. It's just kind of a fact of its operation that it eventually does that. So I would say I would doubt that it's a refueling. It might be. But I feel like if it was a refueling, they probably wouldn't be trying to hide the fact that it's a refueling. They would probably just openly say that. But still, at the same time, we're not getting a lot of information from the area, so there may be an increased amount of radiation. All we know is that the iodide tablets are missing. That kind of shows us that there has to be some sort of radiation leak somewhere, but we don't know much more than that. So I hope that that does address it the best I can, Melody 16040, and thank you once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. Well, actually, thank you for sponsoring that live chat, LSA Rocks, and helping this channel to keep on running, and so that way we can get to such an interesting question, a succulent Chinese meal. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have two super chats from Jesus is Lord and Savior once again, and they threw in two $50 donations. Hey! And they actually put in two Bible verses here. And Jesus is Lord and Savior, I must admit, this puts me in a bit of a tough spot, because I'm not going to make any bones about it. Me personally, I am a Christian, and I do believe the same thing. So the unfortunate part is we try to avoid religion and also politics, just because most people, when they come here for the news, and they don't come here for necessarily a sermon. And that's understandable to an extent. I do get that. So Enforcer, I'm going to leave this up to you on this one. But first of all, thank you very much for that support, by the way. We appreciate it very much. And I would read it, but, you know, it does cause fights in the live chat because some people are definitely not necessarily friendly to Christianity, and some people don't like it. And that's their personal beliefs. They can believe what they want. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have to thank you massively for the support, LSA Rocks. You threw in the $400 super chat earlier and the $250 super chats right here. And I got to say a huge thank you so much for the incredible support. Sadly, though, we cannot read those. Now, of course, like Matthew said, I am a Christian as well. I had to give a full disclaimer to that so that way people aren't thinking, because as far as politics goes, I'm perfectly fine with y'all trying to guess at what my political affiliation is. Matthew and me are both people who have our own political opinions. It's just that it's not the place nor the time for us to talk about our political opinions and what our thoughts are on politics here on the show. That's one thing that I'll make sure to not even disclaim what my affiliation is. And honestly, you know, it's a mixed bag with that. But beyond that, with religion, I will give an open disclaimer that both me and Matthew are Christians. Sadly, though, we make sure to try and have a no politics and no religion rule. We don't really emphasize the whole no religion thing here on the stream because it's usually not something that is brought up too much, a religious sort of a vain thing. But as far as it goes, we try and avoid that because much like politics, religion is fairly divisive, at least in the public forum. And while we have our own beliefs, and we've made that quite clear, you know, we were both, you know, practicing Christians. It's something that we don't really want to try and push onto the chat because there are, from what I understand, pretty much every single religious affiliation here, and a lot like the U.S. government doesn't really get a lot into religious affiliations supporting or condemning different religious groups. We try and do the same thing here on the channel. So if we read off a Christian verse, we would have to in the future read off verses from the Quran or the Torah or possibly from Hinduism or Taoism or in everything else, and we would generally want to try and avoid that as best we possibly can, because then we start getting into religious theology on the channel, and that could end up starting to divide people on something that isn't really this channel's primary focus. So I hope you do understand. Sadly, we cannot read that. I do thank you greatly, though, once again, for support, Jesus is Lord and Savior. That was massively kind of you to support the channel that greatly. But I do want to make sure that we can keep the channel on as neutral and common ground as possible. We don't really want to try and get people caught up in the weeds. And of course, I do want to say, you know, as far as Matthew and me are concerned, religion isn't really the weeds for us, but to each his own. It is a free country, and everyone can do what they want and believe what they want. I'm not going to force anything on anyone, but nevertheless, I do thank you for the support. I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you once again for the massive support. And with that, we are on to the next one. And also, really quickly, I would like to say this as well. I see some people in the chat who get a little bit angry at things, and I actually saw this, and I would like to make a quick comment. I saw some people getting very angry at Jesus, the Lord and Savior, for those super chats in the chat. I would like to make this very clear for people really quickly. Yes, we have a no politics and no religion rule, but just because someone comes in here and speaks politics and religion doesn't mean that you have to personally start trying to attack them in the chat. Matthew and me moderate this stream. If we see something that's out of line or against the rules, or if you see something that's out of line or against the rules that you think needs to be dealt with, report that to us. Don't take that into your own hands trying to cuss people out because you don't like what they said or you don't agree with their affiliations, whether they be political or religious. That puts us in a bit of a rock and a hard place, because while we are trying to deal with things as civilly as possible, and the Lee Spring Army is all about civility and politeness, we're really trying to deal with that and also make sure to tiptoe our way around a somewhat precarious situation. So if you see something like that, I would like if y'all don't like try and do vigilante justice or whatever it is that some people are doing in the chat and just trying to cuss someone out because they put something in like that. It's nothing to really cuss anyone out about. If you don't like it, you know, that's fine, but you don't have to go cuss someone out about it. That's my 2 cents on that. But still, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next super chat, we have another very generous $50 super chat from Beef Taco, who makes a return once again. And it's good to see you, Beef Taco, in the live chat. And thank you very much for the kind words earlier as well. He said, your channel continues to deliver better coverage of the events affecting Ukraine and Israel than any other mainstream media or YouTube channels. And that is a very high praise. Thank you very much. He said, take a question from the chat and enjoy that coffee.
And thank you so much for that unbelievable support. That is insane. The words were honestly kinder, more impressive than the support that time. That's actually pretty crazy right there. And I gotta say, thank you so much for that unbelievable support, Beef Taco. And thank you for the unbelievably kind words, saying that we're better than pretty much every other YouTube channel and every other mainstream media channel covering this. We try our hardest. We really do. And we would cover anything like this if we had to get to it. Of course, I hope that we've been able to cover the Middle Eastern segment as well whenever we were able to get around to it, kind of like tonight. I hope that we've been able to do that as well, because I have Matthew and me, not just me, Matthew and me have incredibly high standards when it comes to news reporting about the factuality, the kind of no BS approach, of course the pro-Western approach, which ends up putting a positive spin on things that the Western world does, because, you know, we're objective and neutral, but we're not going to be that objective and neutral to where we don't support American or Western interests as a whole. But I still thank you so much for enjoying our efforts. We try to be as factually correct on the channel as possible. We try and correct things that are wrong if we can in the future, or live on air if we can. And I thank you greatly, Beef Taco, for enjoying this channel, being back. And we haven't seen you for a while, too, and I'm glad that you're back tonight. And thank you for those unbelievably kind words. That was incredibly nice of you. But we will make sure to get a live chat question in your honor. And thank you so much for saying enjoy the coffee. I think I'm going to have to start trying to dial back the coffee drinking, really. But at the same time, I'm really scared about that, because usually I get a massive headache whenever I do that. But still, thank you so much once again. And we will make sure to get a live chat question. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so the live chat question sponsored by, guess who? Sponsored by Beef Taco. This one goes to, I'm looking through the spreadsheet here, trying to find the one I was looking at. This one goes to No Fascism. They said, how far is the Rostov nuclear plant from the Ukraine border? And also, I know what they're getting at by asking that question. If there is a radiation leak at the Rostov nuclear plant, it will not go into Ukraine, because I believe the winds are prevailing to the north. So it will not go and float into Ukraine. It'll float into Russia, to my knowledge. So Ukraine would be safe, but what is the distance, by the way, Enforcer?
121 miles. But from the active front line, if we can find the closest area, it would be about 213 miles. So it's a pretty good distance away from the active front line. It's not that far away from the the 1991 borders. But like Matthew was saying, the prevailing winds in this region do not take radioactive fallout into Ukraine. They actually take them into Russia. From what we know, the radioactive plume would actually travel kind of eastwards for a little bit, and then it started curving northwards, because of course we're looking at a flat map. This is the Mercator projection, so we're having to factor in the curvature of the Earth. But it would actually flow pretty much over Moscow, probably would start to flow over into the Gulf of Finland, in between Estonia and Finland, and that would be where the first signs of heavy radioactive fallout, at least by Western radiation detectors, would be picked up, would probably be within the area of the northern Baltics and the southern area of Scandinavia. And then that's when we would know if there was a major meltdown that happened at Volgodonsk. But to be entirely honest with y'all, we would also know if there was a major meltdown at Volgodonsk, because there would be a clear sign of visible damage by Maxar satellite that would be picked up here at this nuclear power plant. So we wouldn't even have to know that the radiation exists. We would know that the Rostov nuclear power plant had a complete meltdown, because we would see that a reactor roof had been blown off on Maxar satellite, or that there was major damage to the reactor housing. Sometimes the roofing doesn't get blown off. That was the example of Fukushima Daiichi in Japan, is that the roofs weren't blown off on some of the reactors, but you could clearly tell that there was extreme damage to the reactor housing in those situations. But with that, I hope that does address that live chat the best we can. That was a very good question, though. And with that, we are on to the next. But a huge thank you once again to Beef Taco for sponsoring it live chat, helping this channel to keep on running, and the amazingly kind words as well.
Yes, indeed. And moving on to our next super chat here, we have a $20 donation from Ed Olson, who's also a longtime channel legend. And thank you very much, Ed, for that support. And I do not see a comment attached to it, but huge shout out for helping to keep the work running, and we appreciate it. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say a huge thank you, Ed Olson, for the support. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support is absolutely incredible and helps this channel to keep on running. And so a huge thanks to you once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here is going to go to Andrew Weichhardt, who puts in a $20 donation as well. And thank you very much, Andrew, for that support. He said, are the Russian public finally getting a backbone and protesting against the government?
Yes and no. Like, that's actually a really interesting question, because you're talking about the riots in southern Russia right now. It's a yes and a no at the same time, because they're getting a backbone because they're rioting at all, but the reason why they're rioting isn't because they're tired of the war, it's just because they don't have power. That's actually really interesting, is that they have only been without power, Matthew, for maybe like 36 hours, and there's already riots in the street. Like, here in America, just to put this into perspective, back where we lived in Wetumpka, at one point, we were without power for a week and a half, and I didn't see any riots in Wetumpka. Like, there was none.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh?
You know, in reality, though, like the protests and riots happening in southern Russia right now, like I reported on them in the video earlier today as well, the riots are really not that severe. I think the police arrested maybe like a handful, maybe like 5 people. But I guess you could say the fact that a riot or a protest is happening whatsoever is a bit odd for Russia, but it's not by any means like a revolution or anything like that. It's simply a disgruntled group of people, maybe a couple of thousand, that are unhappy about not having power. And also, not only is power an issue, but also water shortages as well in that region. So they're getting to the breaking point because they don't have the bare necessities at this point.
And it's really interesting, actually. And what's really interesting about water shortages is that that's actually starting to become a little bit of a common issue around the world, either due to population or, well, overpopulation or something else along those lines. And what's really interesting about that, Matthew, I did not know this, is that Alabama is actually one of the most water resource abundant areas in the world. I did not know that.
That's weird to hear too, is we don't have like well, I guess we got a couple of rivers and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess it could be.
Actually, what's crazy, man, is that we have one of the largest amounts of inland watersheds and rivers anywhere in America in Alabama. Like, no, hardly any other state even comes close.
That's really weird to really think that, but it's good to know. I'm glad we have some water.
Yeah, and so what's interesting? Let me see if I can find this. Let's see, gallons of water per person map. So let me see if I can find this. So let's see here. So I'm trying to see if I can find the map. Dang, man, they don't really have a lot of these maps. It's like water consumption. I'm just trying to find the available water per person, because there's a different amount of water abundance in different areas of the world. Some nations, of course, have more fresh water than others, but this is the amount of water consumption per day per person. And it's really interesting to see this, because if you notice, Matthew, here in the U.S. Southeast, a lot of the states surrounding Alabama actually use an excessively higher amount of water per day than Alabama does. And this map is kind of the inverse of what I'm trying to show. It shows, this map does, that Alabama has more fresh water in it and more available fresh water than really any of the states surrounding us, even Mississippi on the Mississippi River, to the point that we use less gallons of water per person than really any other state in the Southeast.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It looks like the places that have the highest the water usage are actually the places where it's almost like desert or like barren and stuff like that. It's like, don't y'all think y'all might want to like turn down the water usage a little bit? You don't have very much to begin with.
Well, you know, well, that's the crazy thing, and this is something I've got to say, y'all. If I became president of the United States, I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to push this. The southwestern states in America are not meant to support the populations they have currently. I don't know. People like it out there, and, you know, and that's great. But there is a finite amount of water in the U.S. Southwest. And right now, from what we know, of course, some people are saying it's climate change or it's overpopulation. I would actually have to lean in this particular instance towards overpopulation of the U.S. Southwest, because if you look at the population of most of the major cities in this area, they skyrocketed over the past 40 years. and the Southwest just does not have the available amount of water to support those kinds of populations. And I feel like these states should be encouraged. And this is a bit of a problem with the United States, is that in the House of Representatives, your state's congressional representations, just in the representatives or the House, is directly correlated to your population as compared to the rest of the United States. So it doesn't really encourage these states to try and tell people to maybe move elsewhere because they're running low on resources. But I feel like the United States government, the federal government, should encourage folks to move out of these areas in the Southwest, because it just cannot support this amount of people. California really can't support the amount of people it has anymore. It's actually a little overpopulated as well as far as the water resource issue goes. But the United States Southwest is kind of dealing with the same problems that the Russian Federation's Southern Don region is with the unavailability of water. And it's really interesting because never before in human history has there been such large populations of people where water usage has ended up becoming a concern, and water is actually starting to become a finite resource compared to the amount of people who demand a certain supply of water.
Also real quick, by the way, like now I feel really stupid. LJ Gaitis said the more dry, the more water they need to farm and grow green of grass. And being in Utah, I know. I feel really stupid now. That's why they're using a ton of water, because there hardly is any water and hardly any rainfall out there, to my knowledge. So that makes a lot of sense now. That makes sense. They're having to like put their sprinklers on everything because they don't have any water.
Yeah, and also another thing that's really interesting as well. This is something else. Is that Saudi Arabia has a high demand. I don't know if you've heard this story, Matthew. This was a story that was actually put out a while ago that was shocking to the entire public. But in Arizona, there is a specific restriction on water that can be drawn for agricultural purposes. And so Saudi Arabia also has that restriction as well, and they've completely banned the the industrial growing of alfalfa plants in Saudi Arabia because it's so water consumptive.
Intensive.
Yeah, water intensive. So what Saudi Arabia did is that they funded companies to come to Arizona and drill for ground wells and pretty much just deplete the ground reservoirs of all water for them to be able to get alfalfa while it's still a big thing in Saudi Arabia. And like, of course, that's just kind of the ebb and flow of the economy. But at the same time, I feel like states like Arizona should be understanding, because there's already a crisis in the area, especially with Lake Mead and Lake Powell, just near Las Vegas, being completely, it's almost dead to a state of Deadpool in this area because the entire region is drawing on so much water that they do not have. Arizona should be a little bit more smart and start to enact statutes within their state that start to prohibit overly aggressive amounts of consumption in the industrial and commercial spaces. The residential space should be held off on because that seems a little bit draconian to start trying to impact people's residential consumption of water. And if you ever look at water consumption charts, residential consumption actually makes up only about 9% or 8% of total daily water consumption on a given day. The most water consumption, Matthew, where do you think most water is used? Agricultural or industrial purposes?
If I had to take a guess, I'd probably say agriculture by far.
Industrial.
And what industry is the main one?
I do not know the exact industry, but I actually saw a chart back in the day when I was in college. It was produced by the United States Environmental Protection Agency because, they're kind of involved in water resources. And from what they said, agriculture and industry made up of course, the majority share, the lion's share of water consumption, but industry, I think, beat out agriculture by around 7%. I forgot what they explained most of that water was used for, but things like fracking actually end up using a lot of water because they use pressurized water and a whole bunch of chemicals inside the water to conduct fracking, which is a massive consumption of water just for a single fracking operation. And then there's a whole bunch of other industrial processes that use water as well. And let's see here. I'm trying to see some people in the chat. Let's see, saying what the water is used for, because I'm sure that a lot of people are going to be coming up with the industrial uses of water. But water is actually a really interesting resource, and it's becoming a big fight nowadays who gets control of what water and where. And that's why a lot of states here in America actually end up getting in legal battles with each other, because one state will start to build a dam inside of their state, and they'll start to cut off a state downstream of all of the water that would have been flowing anyways. So then they sue each other on the federal level to try and stop the other from building a dam, and the other tries to defend the construction of the dam and say that it's a necessary public good within their state and really for the nation. But anyways, with that, this also Quantum Fighter said steel and power production. Actually, that is a pretty high use of water, because literally the entire U.S. power grid boils water to then send the steam through a generator to produce electricity, and there are a lot of power plants that are constantly drawing water to do that. So that is
That
probably
seems like, couldn't you just use like normal salt water for that though? You don't need like purified like
No.
drinking water for that, can you?
salt water is corrosive. So it would start to gunk up everything really quickly, and then it would be prohibitively expensive to keep on replacing or completely rebuilding the power plant's machinery from the ground up.
I've heard honestly, like I get it, you can't use it in the power plant, it'll gunk it up, but I've heard that desalination is getting a lot cheaper than it used to be. So you could probably just take the seawater and start converting it if it's actually affordable now.
Yeah, you probably could. I hear that it's a lot cheaper than it was, but it's still cost prohibitive. But I think they're going to keep on working on that until they get a usable kind of a concept. But another thing I want to tell you, this is one thing that I actually find crazy, and this is something that I'm like, this is just asinine. California wants to build a pipeline from the Great Lakes to California. This is actually something that has been brought up in the California state legislature and has been brought up as an actual idea, to pretty much draw water from the Great Lakes to California, because they're running out of water. Well, they're not really running out of water, but they're running out of usable water for the amount of people that they have. I just got to say,
That's interesting.
that is stupid, because it's like California is already using too much water. Like, that sounds like an opinion, but the fact is they have a finite amount of water, and they're already using more of that than they have. So they're using too much water just by the facts. So what they want to do is they want to start impacting U.S. states that have absolutely nothing to do with California's overconsumption of water. They want to start affecting their availability of fresh water as well. It's like, that seems a little unfair. It's like, just to me, I don't like the idea of California building a massive water pipeline to try and provide themselves with fresh water. It's like, either figure out how to ration the water where the population and the water figures work, or encourage people to move out of the state and elsewhere, so that way the people who are there actually have water. It's like one
That
or the
doesn't
other.
take too much encouragement, I don't think, to
Yeah,
move out elsewhere.
yeah, I don't think so. There's like an exodus.
I'm hearing
going
there's
on.
a huge exodus from California. I'm not bashing California, by the way. If you're from there, there's some very beautiful parts of California, by the way. I know actually several viewers personally that live out in California, but there is a large amount of people leaving California for whatever reason. Not getting into politics or anything like that. Also, and some of it doesn't even deal with politics. People just want to leave there because it's getting too expensive to live there. So, I just want to make that clear. I'm not trying to bash California or anything like that.
Yeah, I would have to say there's some very interesting things to go on with water, since Matthew brought up the whole water shortage thing. It's a really interesting thing to talk about, because and people are like, the world is covered in water, but only less than 1% of that water is fresh water, which is usable water for really all purposes, as far as people are concerned. And so then water scarcity ends up becoming an issue, especially in the modern day, because now the globe is supporting more people than it ever has in the past. It's not really, like, I want to make this clear, because some people are like, oh, water shortages are an issue because of climate change. You can make whatever arguments you want there, but I'll have to say that is markedly false with water consumption, because as far as water consumption is concerned, there has never been more than 8 billion people alive on the surface of the earth all at the same time at any point in history. Before the 1800s, at most, there was about 750 million people to 850 million people alive on the earth at any single given moment. And now we are supporting a population that is 10 times greater than really the historic highs that we've had all the way up until the Industrial Revolution. And so for that reason, you have 10 times the people, and for that reason, the industry, the agriculture, and the people themselves on a residential level are consuming 10 times the amount of water globally. And then that's where the issue lies, is that there has never been this much of a demand for fresh water. And so how in the world do you deal with that demand? It's kind of the Malthusian thing where there ends up being so many people that there's just not enough resources for them. So then there's an implosion of population just because people either run out of water, or they run out of food, or they run out of something. But anyways, with that, we've gone on a deep philosophical rant, man. You have no idea how about water consumption. Say what? Philosophical, really like a deep rabbit hole on water consumption. Those are the kind of videos that I'd like to make because I find them really interesting to talk about, like the most niche and random things that are so important but people don't talk about. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well about the whole water thing. And thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one here goes to B-Man, who puts in a $25 donation combined all together. And thank you very much, B-Man, for that support. He says, thank you, you guys are great, and BC Skyman is a hero, and thank you to LSA. And you have class, LSA, I love it, and I'm really impressed how the LSA keeps their cool, and very impressed. And spread the love, awesome.
And thank you for that massive support, B-Man. And thank you so much for spreading around some kind words to the entirety of the LSA. It is a really incredible thing how nice the LSA is. It's unbelievably nice. Very civilized, very polite. And honestly, as a cocoon, I think that's why so many people enjoy the channel. Because when you go out there in the real world, well, this is the real world, but when you go out into the rest of the world and you deal with people, they're always unhappy, they're rude, they're impolite. And then you come here and everyone's always so polite and so well put together. It's crazy, really, the difference. It's night and day. But I got to say, that's what makes the Least Spring Army so enjoyable to get on and talk to every night for Matthew and me, is because we're talking to really like the most polite community in the world, and it's here on this channel. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the kind words. Thank you for saying such amazing things about the LSA. We love the LSA, and I hope that everyone else does too. Put an LSA in the chat if you do. But with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
Yes, indeed. And also, I was just asked by Fayuma, do you know how to fix an E-drum? Because my symbol is broken. Fayuma, let me tell you something. That is blasphemy, an E-drum. How dare you get an E-drum? It's like, drum set, man. Get a real drum set. It's been a while, honestly, since I played drums and stuff like that. I actually have like a normal sound check Pearl set over here in the corner. I used to play it a lot when I used to be in the band in high school and stuff like that. I actually got to play drums like actually in the band as well, like the entire drum set and all the percussion instruments and things like that. But I don't know how to fix an E-drum, sadly. But I've never actually had an E-drum because I've just gone with the real ones. But anyways, just want to go off on that side little note right there. But jumping back into our super chats, we have a $20 donation from JD Macco 23, and a huge shout out to that support as well. He said, can we drop down on a hood review on Ricketts Glen State Park in Pennsylvania? And I hiked the 22 waterfalls today, a really, really beautiful place, and LSA forever.
I know this ain't no hood. This is in the middle of the country. Man, people these days use the hood review to go wherever they want, but it's fair. It's within the rules. It's actually something so let's take a look at it. And thank you, by the way, JD Macco 23 for the support. So let's look at Ricketts Glen State Park. And I hiked the 22 waterfalls today. There's 22 waterfalls out here? Where is this in Pennsylvania? This is way up in the northeastern area. This is near Scranton. Oh, look, Jack, but
Jack, Scranton. Anyway.
Oh, man. But anyways, let's drop down in Ricketts Glen State Park, and let's just take a look at the street. Oh, at the street? They don't allow you to look around much here, do they? Country roads, take me home. Dude, it's so weird to look at like trees that aren't just nothing but pine trees. Like, it's weird to look at trees that actually lose their leaves instead of evergreens, you know?
Yeah, it really looks dead.
It looks like a bunch of toothpicks, you know, because here in Alabama, no matter what time of year, the forests are almost always green because there's so many damn pine trees down here because the entire state was like stripped of its forests and then they replanted them, and they replanted like nothing but long needle pines. And so there's nothing but evergreens down here. But this is actually not a bad road. I would actually drive this and enjoy that. Like, I would be honest. But let's take a look at the pictures, because I think this is the only place we're going to see the waterfalls. That is a waterfall, and that also looks like a waterfall, and that is a waterfall. And that's a little waterfall.
Oh.
And that's an even bigger waterfall. That one's actually kind of cool. Well, they're all really cool, and that's another one. These are kind of small though, because like you see that log over there. These have to be like maybe about 12 feet tall or something. Like they're not like hundreds of feet tall or anything like that. And then they have this little beach out here, and then they have this trail. Dude, hiking trails look the same everywhere, man. I think I'm gonna die on that hill because this looks like one we went on at Oak Mountain State Park, man.
Yes, indeed. I also just doxed us too, saying we went there.
Well, man, it's in Birmingham. I mean, it's not like it's a mystery, you know, it's in the city. But let's see here. And then we got these folks on top of that. Now that's actually a big waterfall. And then that looks like a much bigger waterfall. That thing's pretty freaking big.
I've always wanted to ride one of those waterfalls down in that little, what is not a kayak. Yeah, I've always wanted to ride one down in a kayak.
I think you're talking about rapids, man. Because if you took a kayak down this thing, I think you'd break your neck. Like at the bottom, man.
I mean, take it down this thing. You haven't seen those extreme kayakers like take them down the waterfall?
You're not telling me someone took a kayak down a waterfall like that. We're gonna go Google that.
I think it was unintentional, but they took it down the waterfall.
Let's see, kayak down a waterfall. Not a rapid. We want a waterfall. So apparently there are people who actually do world records of pretty much just falling off the side of waterfalls.
Yeah,
with a kayak. So the world record is apparently 189 feet.
Man, I'm sure they're sponsored by Red Bull, aren't they?
GoPro.
They gotta be. Oh yeah, but GoPro's the next runner up to Red Bull. Like if you're doing something death-defying, it's either Red Bull, GoPro, or like one of those other companies. I forgot the other one, but it's always one of those that sponsors you.
Or it's just Johnny Knoxville and Welcome to Jackass or something that. He's like the third group. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. Really cool place, by the way. It's actually really pretty. I like smaller waterfalls because the water coming off of them doesn't sound like a raging torrent. It's always like a nice little trickle kind of a thing, you know. But still, thank you so much once again for support, JD Macco 23. That was, believe it or not, folks, a hood review. We looked at waterfalls. It's probably the most tranquil hood review we've ever had, but it was within the rules. And I got to thank JD Macco once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and jumping into our next super chat here, we have one from Carl Patterson, who puts in a $20 donation as well. And thank you very much, Carl, for that support. And he also says, prayers and condolences for BC Skyman.
And I'd have to agree as well. Prayers and condolences once again to BC Skyman for his loss. Very unfortunate to hear about. And I got to thank you so much once again for support, Carl Patterson, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Gunfox61, who puts in a 20, and thank you very much, Gunfox, for that support. He says, speaking of nukes and such, Operation Plum Bob, and also take a question for the live chat, and the U.S. is the only nation to launch a manhole cover into space.
That is true. Did you know that, Matthew?
I did know that, actually. I knew that fact.
Well, let's see here. I wonder if we can find the still of the, I'd be danged. Where in the world is the manhole? Let's see here. Dang, where's the manhole? Hang on. How fast did the manhole cover from Operation Plum Bob go? According to the information, the blast went straight up the test shaft, launching the cap into the atmosphere at a speed of more than 66 kilometers a second, which is equivalent to 150,000 miles per hour. The plate was never found. I would assume that it probably literally just exited the orbit and started flying to the edge of the solar system at that kind of a speed, so they probably never would find it. But beyond that, that is pretty wild to think that we did launch a manhole into space. Who knows where it is? Maybe it ended up hitting one of the planets further out. You know, it could have just been absorbed by Jupiter or Saturn or something like that. Since it's a gas planet, we'll never find it. It just goes pretty much wherever the density is a little too great for it, and then it just sits there. But beyond that, I got to say, thank you so much once again for the support and throwing in that fun little fun fact about nukes, because that was such a cool thing that America did. We're the only one in the world who did it, and we're the only one who ever will. Russia will never be able to do that. They can kiss it. But beyond that...
And also he said, check out Operation Plum Bob.
That was Operation Plum Bob. That was the manhole cover.
Are you sure he said that those are two different operations you said in the live chat?
Operation Plum Bob? Operation Plum Bob? Hang on a minute. When I type in Operation Plum Bob here, people also ask how fast did the manhole cover Operation Plum Bob go? So,
I don't know.
well, if I type in manhole, yep, there we go. Operation Plumb Bob, manhole cover speed, manhole cover video, cover picture. Plumb Bob speed, Pascal B, manhole cover weight, pigs, meme, John.
Interesting.
It's the
Gunfox, let us know if that is indeed the same thing or not.
It is the same thing. I'm just kidding. We'll find out eventually. But still, thank you once again for support, Gunflock61. And while in the meantime we confirm or deny whether that's the same thing, we will make sure to take that live chat in your honor. And so what do we got, Matthew?
And this live chat question goes to LSA Rocks, who says any Russian soldiers training north of that area or take routes through affected areas from the nuclear power plant.
Yes, a lot of Russia's transport does go through that area. We don't know if it's being irradiated at the moment or at all, but the answer to that question is, in fact, yes. They do travel through that area. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support, Gunfox61, and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Scott, the tall guy, who threw in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, Scott, for that support as well. He says, talking about drums is my weakness. He said, I'm a drummer of 32 years. Wow. And he said, and playing an instrument has helped me more than any math or science class has ever done. And also, both my boys are following in those footsteps as well. He said, FYI, it's pronounced djembe, but spelled djembe. And yes, it is djembe. I do know what that is. We had one of those in our high school band, by the way, and it was like the source of fascination for some reason. Everyone wanted to go hit at it. But I will say this: I saw some people asking where was I in a band? It was actually a high school band. I wasn't like in my own band or anything like that. Like you hear some other people being in. It was like a high school band with like the saxophone players, the trumpet players, and all that stuff like that. And I was in the percussion section. I played everything from bass drum, timpani, xylophone, also auxiliary as well. So also snare drum occasionally as well, and the whole drum set. So pretty much everything. So I'm a drummer myself, so I understand where you're coming from. I like a good drum solo, and I love it very much. But I have definitely not been playing for 32 years. You sound like an expert. I'm definitely an amateur. But thank you very much for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to say, that is really impressive to hear that you played drums for that long. I played a lot of instruments. My original instrument was trumpet, though, when we were both in the band. I will never, Matthew, forget. Remember how the chair placement thing was done where you had to challenge the person above you to move up, and then if you beat them, you moved up? Like, remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And then I did that because of course the chair placements at the beginning were arbitrary. It was really just if you were a favorite of the band teacher, you would get a chair placement. So there were 7 trumpet players in our band. I got put at number 5. So luckily I wasn't dead last, but apparently there were 2 people who were a little bit more unpopular with the teacher than me. So I ended up challenging everyone above me to get from 5th chair to 2nd chair. I ended up challenging the first chair person. And Matthew can remember, I was like, I'm going to challenge the first chair person. I'm going to get first chair. And so I go to challenge them, and the music teacher says, oh, I wouldn't even challenge them. It's just a waste of time. Like, it won't even matter. And I was like, what the hell do you mean it won't even matter? So I went and challenged them. We went into the music teacher's office. I actually beat them. And so... wait a minute, hang on. I remember how it was actually put, man. Do you remember how it was put? It was like, I wouldn't challenge them if I were you. I mean, it's not really going to matter if you do. And it was kind of put as, if I do challenge them and win, something would change. So then I went and challenged them. I won. And then as soon as I walk out of the office, I was like, yes, I won first chair. The music teacher went, all right, everyone, the chair placement is irrelevant now. Actually, we're going to be changing the way chair placement is done. It's actually going to be done by the amount of songs that you can successfully play now out of this book. And I was like, what the hell? I was like, I literally just battled my way from 5th chair all the way up to 1st. It was the comeback.
I never liked that lady. I was in charge of the music department. I didn't like her. I'll be honest with you, she didn't ever do anything like that to me. Like I think for the most part, I was like always 2nd chair or something like that. I could never beat out the first guy. I will admit though, the first guy, like in the first chair, he actually deserved it because he could actually play like he was like a freaking like legend on the snare drum and also the drum set. So he actually played better than me, so I could see that. But I was always like 2nd chair. I think at one point I was maybe 3rd chair at some point. But the whole chair thing was actually like an obsession for me at some point. I would go home and like nonstop practice on the drums, like trying to like get that 2nd chair and 1st chair spot. No, but I remember those days, man. It's like nostalgia at this point, thinking about it.
Man, honestly, man, all I think back about is anger about how that went. And it was like I battled my way to first chair, and really just because I got to first chair, the entire chair placement thing changed. And I was like, that is so stupid. So then for like the rest of the band time I was in it, I was like 6th or 7th chair because I literally just stopped caring at that point. I was like, you know what? The system is rigged. Like like they do certain things. I'm not even playing the game. And so then I ended up just getting out of the band because I was like, that's stupid. I will not forget that, how that was done. That was such a petty and stupid thing to do. It's like, oh, I don't really think I like this kid. I'm like a full grown adult. I don't really like this 14, 15-year-old kid. So if he wins first chair, I'm literally just going to change the way chair placement works for the rest of all time. It's like, that was so dumb. But anyways, with that, and look, Chris got it. Music teachers were just grumpy divorce ladies when I grew up. That was pretty much ours. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Fun little story from back in the day, but I never got to play drums. I always played trumpet, and then I ended up playing bagpipes after that. But still, I hope that does address it well. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Live Laugh Toaster. And some last part here, which I cannot say, but thank you very much for the $15 support, and we appreciate it very much. And it said, greetings from Australia, enforcers, and greetings. And it said, with building tensions with China and North Korea, do you think we're doing enough? And current defense spending is up 6% from last year, which nudged is over 2% of GDP.
I would say that as far as sustainment, 2% is good. But if you want to talk about armament, or some people call it rearmament, although I would just call it armament in general, you would have to do a little bit more than 2%. You would have to do like 4% or 5%. Kind of like the United States does. The United States is pretty much, the United States is almost in a permanent state of rearmament. Poland right now is conducting a form of rearmament. They're up to 5.2%. They're going to be up to 6% by next year. So if you want to rearm a nation, you have to get up even higher than 2% drastically. You have to get up to 4% or 6%, depending on your goals, to be able to create a strong and present military force for an upcoming conflict. So I would say that 2% is good for sustainment of the current force, but if you want to grow it, it has to be far higher than 2%. But with that, I hope that does address that well. Very interesting question. I thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. Live, laugh, toaster bath. And Matthew may not read it. I'll read it. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address it the best we can. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Jason Carpenter, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Jason, for that support as well. He says, old school LSA son, and question from the chat.
And you are old school LSA, Jason Carpenter. You've been here forever. You know what's crazy, though, is that really over just, hell, I don't even think it's been that long. Let me check this really quickly. 2024. Okay, so over 2024 alone, since the beginning of this year, this is insane, Matthew. This is actually legitimately insane to look at. Over just the course of this year, we've added another 84,000 subscribers to this channel just over the half of this year. So about a third of the entire channel's subscribership has joined just this year, which is wild because it actually makes the old guards seem really old because they were here like 2 years before really the big influx of people have come in recently and subscribed to the channel. So you are old school, old school. It's really crazy to think we've been around that long to actually have old school LSA, but still, thank you so much once again, and we will make sure to grab a question from the chat in your honor. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and this live chat question goes to, let's see here. It's going to go to Smog, who says, nobody did anything when North Korea developed and tested their nuke, and why do you think anyone will do anything about Iran's nuke?
That's a good question. They probably won't. That's the problem. Is that we're not going to do anything. The reason why we didn't do anything to North Korea is because China actually has a standing and pretty much active defensive pact with North Korea. So if we did anything against North Korea, we're pretty much starting a war with China. And we really want to avoid that. So that's why we really didn't do anything with North Korea. But with Iran, no one actually has a standing defensive pact with them. Like Russia has said they might do something, but they don't have a pact with them. So they could actually back out of all that strongman posing and not do anything. So that's kind of a little bit of a diplomatic difference. But the reality is that there's never ever any kind of willpower in America until something happens, and then we're reactive. America is never really a proactive country when it comes to dealing with situations around the globe. And then in the few times we are proactive, like with the invasion of Iraq in 2003, we're proactive, and then we figure out we were proactive on the wrong reasons, like when we invade to make sure that Saddam Hussein can't get weapons of mass destruction, and then we figure out they weren't even close to making a weapon of mass destruction, like it wasn't even really on their agenda all that much. Then we are like, damn, maybe we shouldn't be proactive, we ought to be reactive instead. But with Iran, though, they are certainly a country that we should be proactive with instead of reactive with, because imagine the implications if they get a nuclear weapon. That's going to be a pretty bad thing for the Middle East, and really a pretty bad thing for the U.S. posturing within that region as well. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And thank you so much once again for support and sponsoring that live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here goes to Heather Fitzgibbon, who puts in a $10 donation, and also Andy L, who also threw in a $10 donation as well. And a huge shout out to Heather and also Andy for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And a big shout out to both of y'all as well. Y'all support helps this channel to keep on running. And while y'all didn't throw in comments, y'all allow us through that support to keep on making comments on air and to keep this news running. And a massive thanks to y'all once again for that support and helping this team to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Ricky Chaos, who puts in a 10. He says,
Wait, let me read
welcome
it.
back, defenders. Flake here. Widow's Peak intensifies.
Welcome back, defenders. I can't believe that's in a super.
Flake here.
Oh, wait, hang on. Let me get it together. What? Dang, I can't believe. I just can't believe that's in a super chat. That's hilarious. But welcome back, defenders. Blake here. More political talk. Oh man, someday people will learn that politics doesn't deserve to be shoved into everything. But that day will be long from now. It will be beyond my lifetime. But still, thank you so much once again. I got a huge laugh out of that. By the way, Ricky, like legitimately, I cannot believe that someone super chatted that. But still, with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you once again.
All right, and our next super chat here is going to go to Wyatt Logan, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Wyatt, for that support as well. He said, because of work and OT, I missed my LSA, even Marmot and Fly, and Thursday was great. I worked hard into the night, and about 2 a.m. Friday morning, I got paid. He said, do you know who had a similar night? Chris's mom.
Oh!
Slava Ukraine.
Oh my God. Someone call a medic. We got a murder over here, but beyond that. Wait, no. Call the coroner. We got a murder over here, but still. Oh my goodness.
Call the medic. We got a murder over here.
Yeah, call the medic and see if we can get him back. But beyond that, thank you so much for the support. Oh, well, Matthew, maybe we got to call the medic on Hot Dog, man, because I don't think he's coming back. Like, I think he's gone. Like, I think he's just not uploading videos.
Oh man, it's time to throw in the towel on YouTube. I just can't make any progress.
Oh man, I think I have enough money for a couple of baggies and some snow. I'll come back when I need more. It just disappears for like 2 weeks, comes back, no explanation. Pupils widely
He blocked
dilating.
me on Twitter, by the way, the other day.
Yeah, I know. Like he talked all that schmack. You literally shot one response back, blocked immediately. It's like, come on. It's like you
I
can't.
had him blocked for like years at this point. Like I didn't care. I was like, I just want to block him and get rid of him and put him away. I'm like, I don't want to see that like messages coming across my screen. And meanwhile, he's left it unblocked and always talked about, oh man, I'm not blocking nobody. I'm a real man. I think I responded to something he put out and said something like, that's right. He'd said something about, I hate cancel culture. And I responded back with like something mundane. I was like, you're the king of cancel culture. And
Which
I put
is
in like
true.
the frowny face behind it. And he said, you hurt my feelings. And he blocked me.
No way. He actually said you hurt his feelings. Like, really?
No, that's what he was thinking because he blocked me over it.
Dude, I was really no way he said that. I was like, that's gonna be wimp behavior right there. So you know what's funny though is that he threatens about reconnecting Jaws or whatever. I think you say he is the cancel culture because he is, and that's all he does against people every damn day of the week he's on YouTube, and then he gets offended over that. It's like like, come on, like.
Man, I was like, I was expecting at least could I get another threat toward me of restructuring my jaw? Could I at least get something? I mean, but all I got was a block. I'm like, come on, man, this is the same guy. Oh, come on, Jack. I mean, I thought he was gonna take me outside the barn, and you know the thing. Anyway,
isn't this the same guy who like encouraged people to actually try and physically harm us or create a situation that would cause harm to us? Isn't that same guy?
Yeah, it's the same guy's been blocked by pretty much everybody. Like I've said before, I have no idea how this guy goes out and gets into such high-profile fights with people. Like I've seen people like literally former, or like it might have been a former army general or somebody. It was some high-profile account on Twitter actually blocked him, and he was making such a big deal about being blocked by the guy. But I'm like, that's not exactly a bragging right. It's like your first interaction with somebody who's like well known was you got blocked by him, and that's what you're proud about. It's like, I'm noticing a pattern here. Everyone seems to be blocking the hot dog man. Nobody seems to be like becoming friends with him, and that's probably because of his attitude. Really, it's so obvious. How come he can't see that?
I don't know how in the world he cannot see that. I think it's because the guy is such a miserable person in real life that literally any interaction with anyone, even if it's negative, is just sought out for him. Because he's so desperate for human interaction. I mean, you got to be really desperate for human interaction when you make a sob story about everything that happens to you. Like, oh man, I went on a date today and it went terribly. And to tell people about that, you got to be desperate for some attention at that point to be able to put stuff out there like that and have no shame about it. Like I'm just saying, if I went on a date and it went badly, y'all aren't hearing a word about it. Like, I'm just gonna put that out there because why would I tell anyone that? Like, I'm not saying like I'm like egotistical or narcissistic or anything, but at the same time, it's like I'm not gonna like air out my laundry for the entire world. It's like if it didn't go well, I'm just gonna be like, oh damn, that didn't go well. I'm just gonna keep that to myself and just keep going. Like that's what I would do. But yeah, the guy is something else right there. But we would have to call a medic for him because it looks like his channel went down. I think it's because of that mustache, Matty. I think he shaved. I made fun of it, and it literally was so. Well, say what? Oh no! Don't sink! Don't sink!
I think we're back now.
Don't sink! Don't sink! Pull up! Pull up! Okay, yeah, I think we're back. Can
you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello?
Do you hear me now? Say something exactly right now.
I can hear you. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
There's a slight delay. Something's going on, but I think we're back.
Oh man, they're saying bad juju about me. Let me DDoS them. But beyond that, I think what happened, Mandy, while he's taking a break, is that he put up that stupid thumbnail of that stupid mustache he had after he shaved, and I made fun of it, and it hurt his feelings so bad he got off. Like I think that may have been what happened.
That could be it, man.
Man, that might be.
I mean, that mustache. I mean, it looks like he's trying to make some films. Captain America. I'm a fan of your films.
Captain America. I'm a great fan of your films. It's like I'm not. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support, Wyatt Logan, helping this channel to keep on running. And I hate to hear that you were working hard like that. But hey, you got paid, and I hope you got paid really well for working overtime like that. And I hate that you missed the segment. It was a good one. But still, thank you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, in our next super chat is going to go to Tom Xman, who puts in a 10, and he said it's $10 super chat, guys. And thank you very much, Tom, for that support.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Tom Xman, and helping this channel to keep on running. It is a $10 super chat, and I thank you greatly for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who helped make this channel possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one here goes to Feelin' Groovy, who puts in a 10 as well, and says, $10 super chat, guys. And thank you.
Hey, and $10 super chat. And I got to say, thank you so much for the support, Feelin' Groovy, and thank you for the $10 super chat. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one is going to go to the B-Man, who puts in a $10 donation and says, do you think oil is outdated? It's time for a change. He said, we have options, and for energy, do you think we can?
That is a real, oh my goodness, man. I would love to go into like a 20-minute long rabbit hole on that if it wasn't like 3 hours and 30 minutes into the stream at this point. I'm going to go a little bit into a rabbit hole on that. Oil is getting to the point of near obsolescence in my opinion, but it's not done yet. Like, a lot of people are really trying to force its obsolescence right now, which I feel is a little bit uncalled for. Oil has such an important place right now in the world, and I would actually argue that oil is going to be incredibly crucial, especially for the Western world, over the next 20 years, because we are currently in a transition from petroleum-based I guess you could say energy production and transportation primarily, to entirely electrical. And of course, the electrical grid runs on oil as well, a good bit, but we're starting to move towards a direction where oil will start to become, or petroleum-based products will largely become obsolete. And so I would say that it's not done yet. I would really say, like, because a lot of people, like, right now, because this is something that the U.S. government is working on, they want internal combustion engines as a transportation form to be obsolete, I think, by 2030. Matthew, is that still their goal? Is that still their listed goal, 2030, or has it been pushed back a little bit?
I think it still is 2030, but a lot of the car manufacturers have started like sort of rolling back on those timelines right there, and they've sort of said basically that they're bringing back some of their gas-powered cars because the electric ones simply aren't selling through.
And I think that is something that has happened, because it's not really like the government said internal combustion engines are going to be gone by 2030. It's really like an agreement they made with the automotive companies that they want them to pretty much phase out all internal combustion engine models and have nothing but electric. But the thing is that it's just not there yet. Like, it's getting there. It will be there eventually. Just like the United States transferred as its primary form of transportation outside of the train from horse to car at the very turn of the last century. This current century right now, we're transitioning from internal combustion engines to electricity, but it's just not ready yet. Like, the electrical infrastructure isn't there yet. It's not going to be there by 2030. The electrical cars, they're not going to really be at a level where they're viable by 2030, in my opinion. I would say in 20 years, all of that will fall in line where the shift or the transition can occur naturally, as a part of really the ebb and flow, kind of like how the change from horse to car did. It was really natural. It didn't require a lot of government intervention. It was just kind of an ebb and flow thing. But I do believe that oil is starting to move on to being a little bit outdated, especially if the electrical grid can be built to sustain the amount of demand that it'll have in the future, and nuclear fusion actually becomes a viable form of power production. That is going to be the way forward by far. It's going to be a lot cheaper. It's going to be a lot more efficient. It's going to be all around just simply better, really, just because for the factor it's going to be cheaper, and for that reason people are going to go for it. And so in my opinion, it's getting there, but it's not there yet. It'll take another 20 years. And that's kind of an interesting thing, because if it takes another 20 years, that means I'd actually be president towards the very end of that transition, when electric would pretty much be taking over completely, by my opinion, or my assessment of a timetable there. And that will be really interesting to see what the world will look like by 2040, because technology is changing so much these days, that what we see in 2040 is probably going to be completely different than what we know and see today. But with that, I hope that does address that well. Also, really quickly, I got to say this, because there's a group of people out there who say this. Like, I don't know if you heard this, Matthew, not to go too deep into a rabbit hole on this one, but it's a conspiracy theory where they go, the government wants you to get electric cars, but they just turn off the electricity. It's like, what, like, as opposed to gas, where they could just stop the, like, gas truck from delivering gas to the gas station? It's like, what's the argument here? It's like,
the government's actually installing mandatory kill switches in vehicles starting, I believe, next year, and it's designed to stop, I believe, drunk drivers or something like that. But it gives the government the remote ability to shut down a vehicle.
You know, I feel like that's unconstitutional. I feel like that's some
Oh,
sort
I
of,
mean, it probably is.
that
It
feels
probably
like
is.
that feels like some sort of government interference or partial ownership of private property. I feel like that could actually be challenged, possibly, and overthrown. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, why would you want to overthrow that if it's getting rid of drunk drivers? Why in the world should the government have the ability to kill switch any car they would want, for any reason? Like, you don't know. Maybe that, well, you do know it will be abused. Like, that's no doubt. Any time that the government gets any kind of an ability, sure, it'll be used for the public good, but there is going to be chances where it's abused. And why in the world should the government be able to have a kill switch in every car automatically installed? Something about that seems a little bit unconstitutional to me, especially about private property ownership and how the government is kind of stepping in and not really allowing you to use your own property how you would wish. It just seems a little weird. And also, someone said carjackers. Yeah, but like if you want to catch a carjacker, you set up a trap car with a kill switch that was built into it by the police department or something. You don't, go, well, you know what? We're going to turn everyone's private property, their own private automobile, into a trap. Like it's like that doesn't really make any sense. And on top of that, when would that ever work? Like someone steals your car, you come out and find out it's stolen. It's not like they're going to kill switch and get the guy. If they kill switch, it's probably in this guy's garage already. It's like, I think it's just going to eventually find a way to override the kill switch, and that's that. So I don't know. I don't really like that much. And also Hector Jack said driving is a privilege, not a right. In modern America, I think it's a right because if you cannot drive, you can't get anywhere because American cities are so large and so sparsely populated in density numbers compared to places like in Europe. You have to get a car to be able to go anywhere. Even just to get to your job, you have to have a car because there's hardly any public transportation, and there is no way that you can walk these distances feasibly. So you have to have a car pretty much nowadays in America to be able to get anywhere. So I hope that does address that fairly well. Yeah, and let's see here. A whole bunch of people throwing in opinions on that, but I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one because we have a decent amount of super chats left, actually a lot of them, and we are starting to run out of time. But still, thank you once again for support, B-Man. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat here, we have a $10 super chat from Richard Philpott, and he says, for BC Skyman.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Richard Philpott, and thank you once again for giving an homage to BC Skyman. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Sully Canuck, who puts in a $10 donation and says, I'm always getting here late these days, but better late than never.
And that's right, Sully Canuck. Better late than never. And thank you so much once again for being our Lee Spring Army member from London, Ontario. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Halligan218, who puts in a 10 and says the Southwest also struggles to handle the amount of water-heavy crops too, and that the U.S. is coast-heavy, and we could use more people in the middle part of the country. And another great stream tonight, and thank you.
Thank you so much for the support, Halligan218. And yeah, it really is kind of coast-centric America is, really, because most of the immigrants, because most of America's population historically came from immigration from Europe or from Asia. Most of them would end up arriving in America. On the East Coast, they just end up staying there, or they'd end up kind of spreading out a little bit further, but no one wants to go too far. And then there was a whole bunch of economic opportunities that popped up on the U.S. West Coast, and then a large amount of those people ended up going over there, and then they were joined by a decent amount of Asian immigrants, actually, interestingly enough, from places like China, and then they ended up making up a large majority of the population on the U.S. West Coast. So that's why it's kind of like coast-centric, and there's not a lot of people in the middle. And also, in the middle, it's really our breadbasket in the country. So there's not really a room there to allow for urban sprawl and stuff like that, because a lot of that area is used for agricultural reasons. But I would say that is an interesting idea. Maybe I would say I am all for anything as long as people move out of the U.S. Southwest. It's not that I hate the Southwest and I hate people living in the Southwest. It's just that it can't support that many people down there. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat here goes to Gunfox61 once again, who this time puts in a 10 and says Air-2 Genie is a thing, and it is a nuclear-armed air-to-air rocket, and that's what I was talking about. But Operation Plum Bob was a series of 29 tests, most were tower blasts.
And thank you for the support, Gunfox61, and thank you for correcting me on that. And also, the Air-2 Genie dude, this missile looks a little weird.
Yeah, it's a little strange looking. It's got a nice cart though with it.
Yeah, it's got a nice little cart. This is it being launched right there from a F-106 of the California Air National Guard, and that is really cool to look at. That picture actually goes hard. Feel free to screenshot. But do we have one of these things blowing up? Oh, look, here's an actual test of the Genie up there. But that is a nuclear air-to-air missile. Like believe it or not, Matthew, that thing has a nuclear warhead in the air-to-air missile.
That's a terrible idea.
Well, actually, it wasn't that bad of an idea, because back in the day when they made this missile, which was produced in the 50s, there was almost no computer technology, and precision guidance of an air-to-air missile was really tough to do. So the idea was that this thing wouldn't hit the plane and blow up on it. and especially considering that this thing would be used to pretty much destroy a large bomber group flying in from the Soviet Union. The idea was that they launched this missile at the big bomber group, it would fly up into the middle of them, and then the nuclear warhead would go off, and it would pretty much not only destroy the one bomber, it would destroy all of the bombers around it.
Well, that's very interesting.
It's a pretty cool idea. They never used it. The only time it was ever tried was right here. That was the only test of it. But thank you for correcting me on that, Gunfox61, because that is an incredibly cool little rabbit hole and a fun fact. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, really quickly, I'm actually going to have to do this very quickly. I'm so sorry, everyone. We're going to have to enact a super chat cutoff because we still have a massive amount of super chats left to cover, and I want to make sure that we get to cover each and every one of them and address them for each and every one of you and give you all the time that you all deserve. So if you have a super chat that you want to throw in and you want to support the channel, you cannot do that beyond this point. We will be, of course, coming back on Tuesday. Tomorrow will be the Sunday fundraiser night, so you can't super chat then. But if you want to super chat and support this channel, we will be back on air on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and then you can support then, so that way we can make sure to give you the time you deserve for your support, and thank you for it, because beyond this point tonight, we won't really be able to do that because we still have a lot of super chats left, and we want to make sure to get to a couple of live chats as well. And also, I hate to say this, but we're going to have to start speeding up my super chat responses a little bit, because we are starting to get really pressed for time. But still, I want to thank everyone so much for y'all's massive support, and y'all's kind words, and all of the amazing things that y'all say. And Adam McLean said, read my super chat, we will, patience, we will. But still, thank you so much once again, everyone, for the support. And we're going to address all the remaining super chats that we have, and then we're going to move on into a few live chats. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are now going to go into turbo mode. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so this one goes to Purple Gerbil, who puts in a $5 donation, and also we have a $5 super chat from Dean London as well that says, would love from the UK.
Hey, thank you to both of y'all so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Thank you so much, Purple Dribble, for the $5 super chat, and thank you so much, Dean London, for the $5 super chat as well. We love the United Kingdom. It's an absolutely amazing place, and I got to thank both of y'all once again for supporting this channel and helping you to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to LSA Sergeant Figment. And he puts in a $5 donation, and thank you very much for the support. And he says, this is the best news channel in all of Russia, and subscribe now.
Dang! And I got to thank you so much once again for the support, LSA Sergeant Pigman. And thank you for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. We are the best YouTube channel, not only in Russia, probably because we're the only ones who tell them actual news. We are the best ones in the world, baby! LSA, put an LSA in the chat. But I got to say thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, LSA Sergeant Pigman, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And y'all all ought to subscribe now, or else. I'm just kidding with y'all. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Jason Carpenter, who puts in a $5 donation, and thank you very much, Jason Carpenter, for the support. He says, we're on the right side of history, my friends.
And we are on the right side of history, my friends. And thank you so much once again for the support, Jason Carpenter, and helping this channel to keep on running. You are the old guard of the Lee Spring Army. And we got to thank you massively once again for helping this channel to keep on running and saying that we are on the right side of history, because we certainly are. The Western world is the best one there ever is, and there won't be one like it. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Chris. He puts in a $5 donation. Thank you very much, Chris, for that support. He says, Enforcer, Israel doesn't need to do airstrikes on Iran because they already have submarines and with cruise missiles and nukes, and Iran should watch to its step there.
And I thank you so much once again for support, Chris, and that is a very interesting comment. The Israelis are nuclear armed. The Iranians should tread cautiously, but nevertheless they don't. And it would be a very dangerous situation to have Israel and Iran nuclear armed within the region. So in my opinion, I would have to say you are correct. Iran should be treading carefully, but Iran is a little bit stupid, and they usually don't tread carefully. And so we kind of have to count that into the equation. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. It is folks like you help to make this thing possible. And thank you for throwing in your opinion. That's a really interesting one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Quantum Fighter, who puts in a $5 donation, and thank you very much, Quantum Fighter, for that support. He says, an investment into my continued enjoyment, and LSA forever, and a live chat question from the masses, please, and Slava bitches.
Hey, thank you so much for the support, Quantum Fighter, and thank you so much for saying that it's an investment into continued enjoyment. It really is a fun time to be here on this channel and get to talk to all of y'all, of course, but at this moment, I happen to talk in turbo mode. Actually, I think about mentally at the speed, excuse me, I'm choking on my spit. I have to slow down, usually, to talk on stream, because I think about 1,000,000 miles an hour, so it's actually pretty easy to talk like this. But hey, it is what it is. But still, I gotta thank you so much once again. We will make sure to get a live chat from the folks down there in the live chat, and of course, Slava Beaches. And so with that, what do we got, man? What do we got in the live chat?
All right, so our question from the live chat this time is going to go to John, who says, what are your thoughts on Ukraine using napalm once they get the ability to use F-16s, and would that be too much?
Ooh, napalm's a little hot and a little bit spicy. I'd actually have to say I'm not really a big fan of anyone using napalm. Incendiary weapons are pretty brutal, and I think that the modern rules of war actually kind of curtail people using incendiary weapons, although not completely. But I'm not really a big fan of incendiaries. It's a pretty brutal way to go. But I hope that it does address that live chat fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support, Quantum Fighter, and helping us to answer that live chat question. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again.
All right, our next super chat goes to Phobos Anomaly, who puts in a $5 donation, and thank you very much, Anomaly, for that support. He says, greetings from Slovenia, and your stream starts at 4 a.m. my time, and I often get to watch it live, and I guess that's the only thing good about my insomnia.
Hey, insomnia's got to be good for something, right? And I got to thank you so much for once again for the support and helping the channel keep on running. And it is really cool to know that you're one of our European viewers all the way from the tiny little country of Slovenia, just east of Italy. That is incredibly cool to know that you're from Slovenia, and I thank you so much for watching this channel so early in the morning at 4 a.m. That has got to be a wild time to get on the stream, but nevertheless, we are massively appreciative of you being here, and I thank you so much for having insomnia to be able to watch this show live on air. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that this addressed that incredibly well. And thank you so much for the kind words as well. And with that, we were on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to the B-Man, who puts in a $5 donation and says, long live the LSA, I love your channel, and love out, and look out for freedom, y'all.
Hey, thank you so much for the support, B-Man, and thank you so much for saying long live the LSA. We love the channel too, because we're running the channel, but I love that y'all love the channel too, because it's a whole day. But still, thank you so much once again for saying that you love your outlook on freedom and all, and because I always love to have that kind of an idea, because I believe it's a core tenet of Western values. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address it incredibly well, and thank you, B-Man, for being an absolute legend of the stream and being here forever, an old guard through and through. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Russ Rizzo, who puts in a $5 donation, and thank you very much, Russ Rizzo, for that support. He says, the National Park Service recommends wrapping the entire underside of your car in a tarp to protect against marmots, and chicken wire is no longer advised.
Really? They actually recommend that? That would actually be really funny if they did. But I got to thank you so much for once again for the support, Russ Rizzo, and helping this channel to keep on running. That is something that I don't really know a lot about marmots. Do marmots like car parts or something? I don't really know. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Russ Rizzo, and sharing that fact with us, because apparently chicken wire just ain't enough anymore. You got to have some of that tarp. Oh, those darn carp. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel keep on running, because it is folks like you helped to make this thing possible. And with that, we're on to the next one. It's sold to the next person with the next super chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
And our next super chat goes to Adam McLean, who puts in a $5 donation and says, just love to you and the LSA, and that's all.
Hey, thank you so much for sending some love to us and the LSA, and that's all. And I got to thank you so much once again, Adam McLean, for supporting this channel. Having been around forever, I know that you know that we're massively appreciative of your support and helping this channel keep on running, because every single little bit counts. So with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to
LSA Sergeant Pigman.
LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a $2 donation. Thank you very much, LSA Sergeant Figment. I got really mixed up there for a minute, but I'm glad I figured it out. But they said, LSA, hit a like button, LSA, and that's an order.
Hey, and LSA, hit that like button. That is an order. We've gotten up to 2,593 likes so far on the stream. That is absolutely incredible. A massive amount of likes. Can we get up even higher than that? I bet we can. And I know that the LSA will not let us down, and they will make sure to hit that like button, because that is an order from none other than LSA Sergeant Pigman. And I got to thank you so much once again for that absolutely incredible support, helping this channel to keep on running, and helping this thing to be possible, because you are one of our biggest fans, LSA Sergeant Pigman. And I got to thank you massively for that. And I also got to thank you for being one of our folks who is an IDF veteran from the 35th Flying Serpents. Incredibly cool. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address it incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the final super chat of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the Morse code decoders and the live chats. So what do we got, Matthew?
This one goes to LSA Dragon, who puts in a 2 and says, LSA every day, every day, every day. 100,
Yeah,
muscle, salute, Ukraine, America.
And I gotta say, LSA every day, baby. I gotta say, I absolutely love that. The LSA is every day, because we run this thing 6 days a week, and there's one day where everyone goes into serious withdrawals. But nevertheless, we thank you so much once again, LSA Dragon, for supporting this channel and helping to keep on running, because it is the LSA that is every day. Unlike other channels who take breaks and holidays and all that kind of frou-frou business, we don't ever take breaks. We don't ever take holidays. We're going absolutely insane behind the scenes. We're losing it back here. But hey, we're gonna keep this news running for all of y'all, because that's what y'all need. Y'all need the news every single day, and we are more than happy to do it, and we love doing this job, and that's why we're here every single freaking day. For 878 days, we've never stopped, and we never will. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're now moving on into the live chat segment. We're going to be addressing the Morse code decoders, 3 live chat segments, and then we're going to be rounding out the stream for the night. So Matthew, take it away.
All right, and tonight we got all the Morse code decoders in here tonight. We got the whole gang. We got Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodge, Urban New, Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Rumpelstiltskin, and David Millsaps. They said the Morse for the night says the LSA Signal Corps. Get you some cooked up Sukhoi while you get them while they're not. While they're hot.
While they're hot.
With the LSA. Hi to both of you.
And That's the sound of money. And I got to say, I'll hit that thing dead on the nail.
Oh,
that was the Morse code message tonight. I got to say, you got to get them while they're hot. Burn Sukhois down there at the airfield. They're down there at Millerovo. You got to get them while you can because they're going to be not be hot for long. They're going to be cooked up and then thrown away, just like every other Russian jet so far in the war. But I got to say that I'm absolutely impressed that y'all were able to get a Morse code message correct on 878 days of the war. Y'all get the thing right every single day. I'm absolutely blown away by that, but I got to say that is an absolute miracle and really cool to know. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're now going to be moving on into the third live chat of the night. The third to the last live chat of the night. So what do we got, Matthew?
This live chat question is going to go to AF Kaplan. He says, why do you think that other news outlets are not covering the problems at the Rostov nuclear plant, and what is all that about?
Well, AF Kaplan, I just simply have to say that other news organizations are bitches. They cannot cover the news like we do, they cannot get the detail like we do, and they cannot get the speed like we do. They just can't do it. They simply cannot. Really, to be entirely honest with you, the reason why a lot of them are not reporting on it is because it's a little bit of an unconfirmed rumor. We don't really know a lot about the radioactive levels of the plant, any confirmed information that it's having a nuclear disaster. So right now, it's just kind of in the limbo land of whether it's really happening or not. So that's kind of the reason why most news organizations are not covering it. But to be entirely honest with you, I think they're not covering it because they're scared that if they did, they'd be causing panic or something like that. But we're not scared of that on that channel because I know y'all are reasonable folks and y'all aren't going to be getting scared about any kind of stuff like that. But with that, I hope that does address that well. Very good question, by the way, you have Kaplan. And we are on to the second to last question of the night. So what do we got, man? What do we got?
All right, this one goes to I Make Loneliness Work For Me, who says, out of all the global areas that seem to be on the verge of a war, which one do you think is the highest risk? And tensions definitely seem to be rising across all, but it's hard to assess which one's the closest, so which one do you think?
That is an incredibly good question, I Make Loneliness, and that is something that you really have to qualitatively understand, and it's really more of an opinion. You see, the Middle East is very close to war at the moment. We know that Israel is probably going to be invading southern Lebanon, which means that they're probably the closest to conflict. Eastern Europe is already embroiled in the conflict, but I think that a further conflict in between Russia and the Western world is highly unlikely at the moment because both sides seem to be trying to pansy around each other and not really get into a direct confrontation. However, between China and Taiwan, it seems as though that within a couple of years, a conflict will most likely be inevitable in this area, as the Chinese military will probably be ready to be able to conduct an armed invasion of Taiwan, and by then we believe that the Republic of China will be trying to move towards an independence front against the People's Republic of China, and for that reason, we're most likely going to see armed action by the People's Republic of China. In my honest opinion, China is probably the one that's going to be the closest to an armed conflict. China is an emerging power. Xi Jinping is trying to conduct a form of national rejuvenation by 2049, and a part of that is trying to reclaim all of China's, the People's Republic of China's perceived territories by 2049. So Taiwan would certainly be under the gun, at least before 2049, and for that reason, I believe that this is probably one of the most hot points in the world at the moment because of the situation in between China and Taiwan. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. Great question, by the way, and I hope I was able to answer that, and hopefully that was not said too fast, though it could be understood, but still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address it incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, Matthew, who is the lucky last person? What happened? Who is the lucky last person that threw in the lucky last question tonight? Who is it, Matthew? Tell me.
All right, and our lucky last viewer of the night is Stang. And they said, a certain YouTuber out there just put out a new video on Russia rapidly running out of MTLBs, and any predictions on the use of horse and carts, since they're already into golf carts and motorcycles?
That is a really good question, Stang. I don't think they're ever going to be moving on to horses and carts, because after the invention of the automobile, horses pretty much drastically declined in population numbers around the world because they were never used. They were never used after that as a major form of transportation, simply because it's expensive and heavily manpower inducive to be able to maintain horses at all. So generally, I would have to say if they run out of motorized equipment, they probably won't have a lot of horses to call on. So once the automation side of things is done, if you want to call it that, they'll pretty much be through. There won't really be a lot for them to call on at that point. So with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. Man, honestly, Matthew, talking at this kind of a speed, it feels weird after doing like the hyper speed segment, because it's like, dang, man, I'm actually having to slow down again. Just for y'all to know, like, me talking super fast, that's actually the way I think. Like, I'm thinking that fast that my voice is actually matching the speed at which I'm thinking. To be able to talk slower like this, I actually have to deliberately think slower and talk slower to be able to talk like this. That's kind of why I'm able to monologue so well for like 2 hours straight on air, is because I'm already about 2 minutes ahead of what I'm saying in my head while I'm thinking. So I'm just kind of shooting out everything that I've already thought. But with that, I hope that it does address that incredibly well, Stang. Very good question. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to say, it was an absolutely fun stream from start to finish. We are absolutely honored to know and humbled to know that so many of y'all watch our news. So far tonight, 57,000 people have watched this stream, and about 7,000 people who were here at the peak. YouTube saying 5.7. I don't believe that. It's probably around 7 because they're misreporting the numbers all day these days. But still, thank you all so much once again for watching. If y'all did enjoy, please make sure to hit the like button. Please make sure to comment. And please make sure to subscribe, because if it wasn't for all of y'all, we wouldn't be able to be here every single day, and we owe everything to y'all. And so y'all can, of course, count on us to be here tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and also to run the LSA's famous Sunday night fundraiser. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, thank you all for another great stream tonight. And for some reason, I'm starting off talking super fast, but I've got to slow down a little bit. But thank you very much for watching tonight. And be sure to join us tomorrow for the fundraiser stream, because tomorrow is Sunday night. And of course, we're going to run another very good fundraiser for a Ukrainian charity to help out the people of Ukraine. We do that every single Sunday, and we're proud to do it again. And be sure to join us. And with that, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and we'll see you all tomorrow. And good night.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards